Yes. Oh, these, I think they'd be great. I said, yeah, I can't disclose. And I was like, you're the only one.
Test, test.
Definitely wasn't me. You know, and-
Tara, is there Tara?
She got.
For automated technology aircraft.
I did.
And non-armed. Arms. Technology, and then the GIS tracking from students, but we can't do that in the state of Washington, we have to have a warrant. to do GIS tracking.
I'm surprised Flock doesn't.
You can hear me?
Grant opportunity.
And by those, there's something different. Yeah. But this
Good.
is federal, so Libya and those guys can jump on.
So excellent.
Okay.
Testing, testing.
Yeah.
That's not.
Good. Good presentation of info.
Testing, testing.
Actually.
Test.
Okay.
Oh, okay.
Let's get people back in here and get going. It's Friday, I got all kinds of clubbing to go to tonight. Are you ready? Doom, 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 doom,
Oh,
doom,
totally.
doom.
Did you have a stamp on your hand again?
Yeah, I got stamps on my hand.
We're going clubbing.
It's going club.
Class. I just want to go. Now I don't want.
Drop my E. Are we?
Okay, we are live.
All right, we are live. So let's go back to. Are we done with the discussion on the facilities analysis?
I'm done unless city council had any direction or further comment.
Is there, just to go to the facility discussion. Is there any of the option, I think we threw about 5, 6 options. Yeah, just for. For staff's sake. What ones can we just say? No, not even gonna think about it. Or better yet, what are the 2 that we should probably focus on?
Yeah, I think out of that 3, because I think we walked through and narrow it down. Again, I think there was, I think as Councilmember Patrick is talking about what meets the long-term goal probably becomes the most important, and then financials kind of follow that with the debt capacity. We see that we can afford it, and so it's again, what meets the program now and then in the future.
Is. If, I mean, I know we haven't had the direct conversation on the Everett Clinic, is that even a site that we would want the city hall?
In my opinion, no, personally.
So really, it just comes down to what. We can figure out for the South Lake Stevens campus.
I even say option 1 feels
Kind of sketchy.
short-sighted.
Yeah.
And not worth the money.
Yeah.
To have a sort of plan that only actually works for a couple of years.
Yeah.
I mean,
The problem I have with those kinds of things, I mean, short-sighted is that, it took Marysville, how many years to actually get there? How long's been Rogan working on it? We can work on this stuff for 20 years and just keep pulling over. That's a waste of money. Not to mention the fact when it gets more expensive as we go. So, if we're gonna do something, I think we can do it right, get it over with, but making around.
I agree.
That doesn't even answer the question of whether we're going to allow you to do it. But
But when you say that, you're talking about option 2.
I'm saying that option, my opinion, as I stated before lunch, was option 2 seems to be the best option. Easy enough to go out for read 1 on that. And I mean, and including the public works. It's big too money. I think that's where we need to go to accomplish what we need for
I agree.
our staff. And I've said before, I'm all about treating our staff right, either through their salaries or, what they have to deal with on a day-to-day basis, getting their tools right and the whole work. So I just think, as it has been put to us, number 2 is the best way to do it long term. And to do anything else different than that, I think is a waste of time.
I guess my only thing is that I would like a clear articulation of other projects we kind of have in the hopper that could also use this money. And, the last thing I want is to,
That's one of the reasons I brought
yeah,
that question up is because we could use REIT money for things like sidewalks and
Right.
stuff like that, but we also have other options to be able to do that, and I think sidewalks is a very important thing to get done. There's a lot of people talking about it, talk about it all the time, but we have other options to use that money for that. We can use REIT money for that, so to your point, we need to know those options.
yeah, and I want to be particularly careful about that because if this is the group that's making that decision, we're gonna have to justify it, and if we're putting it ahead of other projects, we better be able to explain why.
Okay, good discussion. I think that's a good direction for us to. Move forward on. I appreciate the council working that one. It's a heavy lift, but it's a lift that. We need to get done and. Just get our city government side of things, house in order on it. So. All right. Let's move to, so we went through quite a bit of the staffing requests this morning. So let's move into what I'm proposing for a budget this next for this next year. And
Oh. are
I
you
would really like it to be, you know, a really good workshop on this budget. And my proposals on it and that way we give Barb a really good solid head nod today on where you guys would like to see the budget. And so it makes it a lot smoother process as we move forward through the budgeting process. So
She's bringing it in, yeah.
Barb, you have the floor.
Very good. Have my screen in front of me to make sure it's working, but I can see it in the, I guess that's
A
okay.
reflection.
See it in the reflection. Okay, so as Mayor said, we're gonna go into his preliminary proposed budget. So I always obviously bring up our budget calendar just to kind of show you what's coming up. And as I mentioned, so we'll be looking at the capital projects and the transportation benefit projects at the 26th meeting. So Aaron will have capital. I've already received their capital CIP stuff, which we did already meet with Gene and the mayor and Russ and kind of got together and said, here's the priority. I just need to determine funding sources for all of that. So bring that forward to you. And I will say, I don't call it the transportation benefit district anymore, as it's not an actual district. We assumed the district into the city. So I just call it the transportation benefit program. So you'll probably hear me say that more than transportation benefit district. I think that just kind of helps with some of the confusion. So, and then everything else on here is the same. So I won't go too much into that since you just saw it on Tuesday. Again, just moving forward, I wanted to put some of this information in here because it will go online. And so people who aren't here will be able to see what we talked about and what the budget priorities are. These again are rolling forward into 2023. I know we talked about some of these big things, APWA accreditation, the transportation benefit program, Park and Rec. So all these things we still need to kind of do, and the capital projects that are in process. We're still working on all of our lean process and leaning everything up, and then obviously attracting and retaining highly qualified staff. So I mentioned this slide last or on Tuesday, as I say last week, on Tuesday, that I do have in here when we talk about our pots of money or buckets of money, this is kind of how it's broken out. I do have a bit more detail. I think the one that Kim had sent to Kelly is one I did a number of years ago that breaks down what each fund actually does, what the restrictions are. But the orange, the current expense funds, those are all general funds. And so we have a general fund that is our operating fund that has all of the administration, police, planning, community development, parks, all of that. We have the contingency reserve that we put the one-time construction sales tax into, and then we have the permit revenue, which is managerial and restricted as well. And then we have the pandemic recovery fund. That's one that we talked about that we have. The majority of the funds encumbered for specific projects or uses, and then a little bit left over. The special revenue funds, this is when there's a specific funding source that is at least 20% of the entire fund. And so street fund, their designated or dedicated resources are the motor vehicle fuel tax, and then there's transportation tax that's not related to the transportation benefit program. And so that makes up, it's usually just over 20% of the fund. We actually 28% of our property tax goes into there, and so that is unrestricted. But the motor vehicle fuel tax, the rest of those are limited to the use of street funds. So, and then we have a drug seizure forfeiture fund. That is when the police do seizures, forfeitures. They whatever they're doing, any of the money we get or if we get vehicles, they dispose of those, and then any money left over, the state gets a portion of it, and then we get to keep a portion. And that goes into a fund that's specifically to mitigate drug use and enhance our drug programs in the city. Municipal arts, this one kind of goes back and forth because it is there is a dedicated source of funding, and it's 1% of all eligible capital projects go in there, but the eligible funding is pretty restrictive. So it doesn't include any of their restricted capital funds, like any REIT. So if we do a project that's REIT funded, It's not 1% of that fund. It's if we do funding, if we do projects out of the general fund or unrestricted money, then we put 1% into that. Other than that, it's a contribution from general funds. So that might turn into a current expense fund. We just don't change it from year to year. It's basically, if you look at it over a 5-year period, does it still qualify as a special revenue fund? And all of this has to do with the auditor's office. They tell us how we actually do our accounting and how we do our reporting. And so this is all there. So, and you can see we do have a actual transportation benefit fund. And so everything going into that fund is the revenue from that. And that is how we will report and allocate our funding for the actual projects. So debt service funds, that's pretty.
I think I asked this before, but I'm not sure what it's on. Transportation benefit fund comes from the TBD that we put out, so the sales tax revenue that's coming in is quite into that.
Mhm.
And we also, as a council, decided to put more money from the general fund or other funds into that fund.
I would not put it into that fund, no. You can use other funds for transportation benefit programs. But this is actually the one that we need to report on to the state of every dollar that comes in that's transportation benefit related and every dollar we use. And so if we have other funding commingled in there, it's going to be much more difficult to actually report on exactly what we're doing with the funding. But yes, you can put more funding. We're talking about trying to get grants and things to go along
But
with
that
the,
wouldn't be put into that fund.
Mm-mm.
It would be. It's
It would be a
all-
matching.
yeah,
it'd be
it would-
a matching fund, okay.
Yeah.
So it would be, okay, reported differently.
Yeah.
Got it.
just a reporting. Debt service fund, we have a few debt service funds left. And then your general government capital funds, as we mentioned. Good thing. Traffic mitigation funds, those, as you know, we have 3 separate transportation impact zones, where we take money in those zones. They have to be spent out of those zones as well. Park mitigation, as we mentioned, the REIT and REIT 2, we keep those separate. They have separate limitations. There is a downtown development fund. We used this fund quite a long time ago when we started the Main Street project and design. That is actually where the funding is sitting for the museum, for the property that we sold, sitting there waiting for to be used on the museum. The 306 facility, that is actually was used for the police department building, but it's actually any facility projects that we're going to do. That's where we we put money into it and spend the money out of there. 307 infrastructure, that one is the Costco area, all the roadways and all of that we've done in that area to mitigate or to take care of it. We got grants in there. We've got additional funding and all transactions going in and out. So that one is in there specifically for that purpose. And then we have the 309 sidewalk fund. The majority of the funds coming in for into the sidewalk fund are transfers from the street fund at this point. Additionally, we had this year, because we did the ADA program, we transferred the funding that was in the street fund for pavement preservation. We took that money, we put it into the sidewalk fund to spend it out of the sidewalk fund on the ADA program. Utility enterprise funds, those are, they have to pay for themselves. So we can't utilize funding out of the stormwater or the sewer, the usually utility funds. And so any money coming in is through fees, not necessarily taxes. And so fees have to go towards that program itself. So they are self-funding. You can utilize general fund money because it's unrestricted for some of these utilities, but you can't use utility money on general fund expenses. So we do have allocations of salaries and benefits, obviously, going into this these funds. As you know, as a finance person, we're doing payroll for the entire city, and so we have allocations into those as well. As you know, we have a stormwater capital fund and a stormwater debt service fund. All of those, when you see them on the financial statements, if you ever read our financial statements, they're all rolled into one as a presentation requirement. Internal service fund, this is where we put the money that we are saving for future expenses. So our unemployment, we are self-insured in our unemployment. And so we put transfers of money in there. We do have a policy on when we actually increase the funding there. The 510 information technology fund, that is obviously the IT. That's all of our renewals and capital and replacements for computers. We take money from the other funds, from general fund, streets and stormwater fund, based on allocation, put it in there. Troy happily spends it. 515 vehicle fund, this is actually created for the planning community development fund when they started purchasing vehicles for their building officials and inspectors. We are looking at what we're going to do with this funding as it pertains to the leasing. So luckily there is money in there. He does have some of the leased vehicles will be coming through. So as replacements occur, there is funding in there for that. 520 police equipment, exactly what it sounds like for the vehicles. There's a couple other things in there as well. At one point we had the body worn camera funding in there, but since it's going into a different annual program, it's actually just coming right out of their general fund now. So it's a little different than the way we've had it before. And then public works, this has historically been parks, street and stormwater funding going into that for all the replacement vehicles. We might look at changing that up a little bit since stormwater has its own capital, just depending on what we're doing with leased vehicles, replacements, that kind of thing. We're just kind of looking into who's utilizing which vehicles more or less. And so we'll figure that out and get a little bit more allocation. And then the custodial treasurer trust funds, those just aren't our money. That's when you see the budget increase, decrease. It's not our money. It's like state fees and things that come into us that we have to pay out to the state. Okay, that was a lot of information. I wanted to put it in here so you guys kind of got a big overview on it, but you have it in a presentation if you ever want to go back to it and take a look at what these are. And if you have any questions on what these are, let me know. I can dig further into what each one does and what the restrictions and limitations are in the future. So I did color code this ending fund balance comparison citywide to those. As you see, the general fund ones, the special revenue, debt service. So I have them by type. I showed you this last meeting with just the ending balance estimated and then that base budget. In this one, I actually show you what the ending balances were for 2023 requested. So all of the requests were about $3 million more than the base budget was. And then we have the mayor's proposal, which is actually brought it back down to about $1.25 million worth of requests going forward in the proposal. So we'll go into some of this right now. So your cost of living adjustment, this is the first thing that we are talking about. The current CPIW for this year is 4.5%. I did mention this during our base budget discussion. The city has historically done 90% of CPIW to keep us competitive and comparable with other cities. Additionally, the union represented job classes, they typically receive COLAs, and this is when we talk about the 4% COLA recommendation, this does go in line with what we're doing. I know one of the things that this might actually do though is not keep us at that 60th percentile like we've talked about, because there are other cities who do the full CPI. I know Monroe is actually one who does that. They do CPI-U, which is actually more than 4.5%. And so as we move forward doing 90% of CPI, it will start bringing us back down to 50th percentile and that sort of thing. So at this point, the recommendation right now is the 4% COLA, but I do have in here what it would be. So our estimated total for that 4% COLA for non-represented staff is about $250,000. I do have a note down here. We estimate about 20% of that amount of money being reimbursed from the permit funds for permit related work back into the other fund, or back into back into the other funds. So yeah, so this is what we have for the cost of living. If we did do the full 4.5% COLA, it would add about $20,000 citywide. So it's not a huge amount of money. Approximately $10,000 would go into the general fund expense if we went from the 4% COLA to the 4.5% COLA. Right now, your base budget and your mayor's recommendation include a 4% COLA for all of the non-represented staff. For the represented staff, the guild non-commissioned, so the records people, their contract goes through 2024, and so theirs already has a 4% built into it. And then the Teamsters and the guild commissioned are still in negotiation. So the 2023 contract is still in negotiation for Teamsters, and then they're starting the guild negotiations now. In our base budget, we have a placeholder in there of 4% across the board for all the unions, just so that we actually can show that we're planning something. We don't know exactly what it will be yet, but we have something in there as a base amount. And if you want to jump in on any of these, Mayor, as I'm going through with them, you feel free, but.
I will.
Okay, so this is another thing that our Anya has brought forward to us, is just kind of other benefits. We're always looking at salaries and things. What other things can we bring forward to council? And one of the things we mentioned earlier was longevity. We mentioned payroll things, like when different union contracts and non-representative have different schedules of vacation accrual, longevity accrual, those kind of things, it makes it more difficult to track. One of the things that we have brought forward is a proposal to update the non-rep longevity percentage to align with the represented employees. And so you can see in this table here, the current, so based on years of service, our current percentage, at 5 years, you get 1%. The proposal is at 5 years, you get 2%. 10 years, go from 2.5 to 4%. And this is in line with, is it both? It's the guild contract. They have, this is their table that they use, and that was from the last contract, I think. So the one 2020 through 2023, this is what, how theirs is updated. So it would be about $30,000 citywide on January 1st, and my numbers are slightly rounded, so anything that you had in the actual packet probably said 28,000 something. And so general fund would be about $18,000 of that.
What this also does is help the compression issue between the non-represented police, or the commander, the DC, the chief, and like that alignment with your sergeants. And so if they're getting a higher longevity rate than our commanders, then their pay is going higher potentially than the commander, just due to the specialty. So this does help with that compression issue that we constantly have because of the layers of management. Just the more layers of management we have in that situation, it's harder to keep that compression rate of that.
And then there was actually a few other things that Anya had proposed or brought forward as discussion points for benefits. And I only have 2 additional ones in this slide. I think the other 2 were, there was a Teamsters retirement for medical that is in your packet, that there's a little bit of information in there. We don't have that one in here. And then there was the HSA, I think, and that one's not in here either. So I will let Anya kind of talk about the vacation cash out nature or VIVA, as these are things that she's actually brought forward to propose to council.
So like Barb said, always looking at new ways to increase our benefits or make them better and make us more competitive, keep retention and recruit highly qualified staff. Some of this, just these 2 options right here listed on the right, the vacation cash out and the HRA VIVA contributions, are both options after reviewing the sewer district's employee handbook, that these are benefit options for them. So kind of just forward thinking on trying to make sure our benefits align down the road. One of the options they have is a vacation cash out. So what that means is having a policy that says if you use 80 hours of your vacation in a year, you have the option of cashing out 40 and a maximum of 40 hours per year at the end of the year, as long as you maintain like a healthy balance, and we would determine that would be in the policy. So this does a couple things. We still want to promote the work-life balance, make sure they're using the vacation, not just saving it for cash out purposes. So we don't want to have like that minimum threshold. It also would help people at the end of the year, maybe buy Christmas presents for their kids or take that vacation they wanted, and allows them to offset their accruals. If a lot of people tend to save their vacation until they start reaching that maximum, and then they start using their vacation, and so they're always floating around that maximum. And so this would help them offset, stay at maximum. The benefit to this, well. The con is it's kind of hard to budget. It's a liability fund we would have to set up. We don't know how many people would use the program, so we would need to figure that piece out. But it is a benefit to the city down the road because as you know, as COLAs and salary surveys, we're always increasing salaries. Your vacation is actually worth more the longer you keep it. So this, if they're cashing it out, then they're not holding onto it as longer, which creates less cost to the city down the road. Can I explain that in a way that makes sense to you? So there's that option to add that into our policy, and then the HRA Viva contribution was something that we had been thinking about. Well, like I said, it was also in the sewer district's policy manual where they have a sick leave cash out option that goes into an HRA Viva. An HRA Viva fund is it's like a benefits card you can have or a benefit account. It's invested and it's pre-tax to the employer and to the employee, and it gets put in a fund and you can use it for medical premiums when you retire. If it stays with you, it stays with you even if you leave the city. And you can use it for like helping pay for your kids' braces. You can even use it to buy like ibuprofen and Band-Aids and heating pads and anything that's related to medical. They have a whole list of things that's IRS regulated that you can use this money for pre-tax. So the sewer district has a policy where you can cash out sick leave every year, and they have like a table in their policy that shows the thresholds and how much you can cash out and how much they would put into the account every year if you opt for that program. There are other ways to fund either contributions. We could there's an option similar to what we do right now. We do a 1% match for deferred comp for non-represented staff. We could look at something where we just give a flat rate, leave a contribution into all the employees' accounts, so they have a medical expense account or a retirement savings account. One of the things we've been talking internally about is how do we set up employees for retirement. One of the biggest costs and one of the biggest delays in retiring is people trying to pay for medical costs and medical premiums. So if we are being proactive, thinking about how do we help and support our employees and their families by putting away money for those medical premiums when they retire, that could incentivize early retirement, or help the families that need the money now. So there are many ways, like I said, to fund this HRA Viva contribution. The sewer district funds it with the sick leave policy, but if we were to be putting this in the budget, we would look at that more closely, and we have several options we could bring back.
I think one of the other things that Anya had brought up to me is that because these two already have, the Lake Stevens Sewer District has policies in these, it helps us to align with that for when we do assume them. If we don't have that, we would have to look into doing that anyway, as there's going to be a takeaway from them kind of, and so this helps us to align with some of the things that they already have in place. And we've been talking about vacation cash out for years, we just haven't put it into an actual policy or anything concrete at this point. So a couple of good ideas. Are employees able to contribute to the Viva? Just employer?
Right now, we do have a Viva program, and so it's already set up, which is nice. So it wouldn't take a lot to just add to the program. Currently, we have a Viva program for dual opt-out medical coverage. So if someone's already covered by their spouse on a different medical plan, they're opting out of the city's insurance, that saves the city a lot of money. So we incentivize that by contributing into the Viva for them. And we have, I believe, 8 employees participating in that program.
And I think it's based on half of our savings, is they get a half of that portion. And then also when employees retire, they can cash out their sick leave into the Viva account.
Percentage
A
of it based on
percentage.
their years of service.
Percentage based on years of service, how much you have, so,
Is that the only place they can cash out?
yeah.
It's in the Viva?
Otherwise, used to, that's actually a benefit now that we actually changed a couple years ago. Prior to that, you had to give 2 years notice for retirement, and then you could transition your sick leave into vacation. And then you could either take that or cash the vacation out, but it was 1/4, I think, 1/4 of an hour for every hour of sick leave or something. I don't think that's in our policy anymore. I think we eliminated that.
Just have that
to
with
the-
Teamsters.
Okay, so that's still in the Teamsters contract. Yeah, that's the only one we have right now. So this is kind of going into the whole, looking at the whole proposed budgets and how it's allocated by department and fund. So the top table, you see the mayor's proposal. This starts with the proposed staffing. And I did break out item request versus IT item allocations, as IT has a lot of security things that they're trying to update this year, and so I wanted to kind of break those out for you. So you see there was the second table has the requests, and this is all the requests that were received. The total by department for the request was about $3.5 million. After going through it, and I will say, we did meet as staff. I think I put it in my staff report for the prior meeting, that we actually got together as an entire executive staff with all the directors and managers, kind of went through everything to see everybody else's proposals and requests and how much money we had available in order to make a really good allocation on the actual proposal. So as you can see in the mayor's proposal, the total by department total is about 1.5 million. So reduce that requested amount going into the budget by about $2 million. The graph here just kind of shows you, I think I can actually go on and no. So it just kind of shows you by department. The city clerk, human resource, IT, tech, planning, police, and park and general government are all the general funds. And then street and stormwater are broken out separately. There's a lot of information on this one. I kind of wanted to show this to you in a couple different ways. These are the staffing recommendations for 2024, the position summary, and what quarter they are being allocated or starting, and then also how they're actually allocated by fund, whether it's general, street, stormwater. I do, as you can, on the bottom table, the staffing and wages, where it breaks it out by the fund. The last column is the permit. You don't add that into the total. That is just what's getting reimbursed to the other funds. And in this case, all of that funding is reimbursed to the general fund. So you'll see the full allocation being in the general fund, and then just permits is what's being reimbursed. So you would reduce that amount by the total. So what we're looking at here is the graph shows new positions in Q1. That is one new position. That is the IT security analyst. And this is being proposed as a half-time position. This was discussed with Troy and Nick of how, what will a half-time FTE get you? Is that enough for this based on the other programs that are in place? And this is where they are set at this point. $75,000 is for that half-time position. And that is salaries, benefits, and setup costs. So that is in there at this point. Also, the top one you see, municipal services manager, city clerk reclassification. So that 15,000 is the difference between the current salary, what the salary would be, and it also includes some additional travel training for this position. That would also occur in Q1. So I have in the graph next to it, one new position and one reclassification in Q1, and then the total dollar amount. Q2, you have a few things. That's the records management specialist.
Barb, we've had a request to try to make this bigger. Can we do that? Is that possible? More the graphs or the chart? Chart.
But I can make that bigger.
Okay.
You can.
Yeah.
I can.
It's in your packet.
I did.
It's in your, Mary, it's in your packet.
plus or minus.
Actually
Oh,
not
wait,
this.
look,
Yeah, it's.
look at
Oh,
how
it is?
fancy Troy just made this. Hang on a second.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, you're right.
20 minutes.
Okay. Oh, look at that. She did it.
Oh, she did it. Thank you.
Troy did it. Thank you. This is the part you want to see?
Yeah.
Okay, only problem is I can't see the rest of it. Okay, well, I'm gonna let you go back to your packet.
Right here for you.
You have it in the packet. I did send this actually to Kelly today. What'd you say?
I said, trust her, it's fine.
I trust you.
Just put verify. I'm busy, right? I did send this PowerPoint to Kelly today to actually,
I've emailed it out, yeah.
it's probably sitting in your email somewhere, but. Sorry about that. I was working on it till late last night. Couldn't actually get it in any earlier than that, but okay. So the municipal services manager, city clerk, as we mentioned, as Kelly went through earlier, this is the difference between her current salary and the new position. And then, as I mentioned, the records management specialist in the city clerk. This is actually proposed as a half-time position. To start with. That's the amount that's in there. That again is Q2. And then the crew worker in parks. It was discussed whether crew worker or seasonals would be better, and it kind of, you know, getting the actual crew worker in place. There's also a savings in overtime that they're actually utilizing right now for parks. So that is in there. Q2 as well. And then Q3, we have a couple of reclassifications in the planning building department, and that is for a planner to go from potentially an associate planner to a planner. So some increase in duties and wage, and then building inspector from the entry level to an upper level reclassification as well. And then a couple of temporary public works crew members, and I know these are set in street, but they may be utilized in facilities as well, as we mentioned. And then the rest of these, we don't have budgeted in the 2024 budget. I know these are future needs, and just looking at the allocations, this is currently the yeses for this year.
By the mayor.
By the mayor. So this is the mayor's proposed budget. So if you want to discuss these more, you could do that now.
So I only got so many nickels. There's your nickel.
So that's one of the first things I should say. That's one of the first things that we started with is where's the revenue? You know, how is our revenue doing this year in comparison to last year? And what the way we looked at for 2024 is I think I mentioned it during the discussion on the base budget is we're looking right around somewhere between I think 600 and 700. And I think we got notification of the property tax new construction being 89,000. So there's somewhere right around 700,000 additional dollars in the general fund for requests for the entire year. And those are obviously, we have to consider them. All of the staffing, those are all ongoing. So they're only going to accumulate more and get more expensive every year versus one-time requests, which we'll get into after this. So we nitpick the pennies for sure.
I'll start. I have a question for Sarah, actually. Can you talk about the pros and cons of hiring a crew worker one versus a park ranger?
Yes, so the crew worker with their job description are able to do all of the grounds maintenance, repairs, trash, special event support. A park ranger would be able to do light cleaning and light landscaping, but their primary focus would be interacting with the public, gaining compliance, informing people of rules. We would hope that it would alleviate some of the police officers' time. The biggest target we would have would be to reduce vandalism and connect with our younger generation.
Of those two, it's for you personally and your needs within your department, which do you feel like is the
In talking to the park supervisor and the park lead, their request was to have a park ranger preferred over a crew worker because of the amount of vandalism that we see. In addition to knowing we need weekend shifts and we need afternoon shifts. However, it was discussed, I know especially with other conversations, that by only having one park ranger, you're only putting a small dent in that. To be effective, you might need 2 full-time park rangers to really see the benefit.
And it seems like one way to determine that would be to start with to see what the need continues to be.
I think that our conversation we had before, though, where we're looking at actually how much is it costing us for the vandalism, so what it really costs, and we had that discussion earlier. And does a park ranger actually get paid for because of that? We don't have that down. So I think that's an important piece for us to know going forward on our budget negotiations. Is to see if, does the council see the need to put in a park ranger based on what the real data is on staff time, costs of equipment, things like that on the vandalism. It's got to be higher than what we discussed.
So, just so you have a little of what was in my brain housing group on this. Would love to have a park ranger. Our thought with going with the parks crew worker instead was to increase our training on our parks workers to be able to actually pick up the phone when they see something and have a police officer respond to an incident. I understand you don't have the proactiveness of the park ranger, but without 2 park rangers, it's pretty tough to do a shift. So my thought was we add a parks crew member and do additional training on our current parks folks to be able to, when they see something, it's okay to call and get a police officer there to deal with it for now until we can afford park rangers.
What I heard earlier, though, in terms of training, is that there's a deficit in the ability to provide basic training, let alone enhanced.
Yeah.
One of the other things we haven't been able to fully roll out yet is IT had a great solution called Halo sensors that we put in our restrooms. They have the ability to be programmed to have a strobe light or an audible sound when a behavior happens, such as smoking or loud noises, which would be in restroom vandalism. The function of it being audible right now was defective, and that needs to be replaced in order for that to work. We would love to see, once that's working, if we can cut out the inside restroom vandalism, and so we can implement that in all of our restrooms, and it would be an affordable technology piece that could be a deterrent. We just haven't been able to test that in real time.
I have a question based on the comments I just heard. What is it about the park ranger position, your training credentials, that commands a $40,000 premium over another crew worker functioning in that role?
Great question. So they have to go to Park Ranger Academy,
Okay, so there's
which takes several months and an expense, unless we can find somebody who's already been to academy, which of course would be something that we would be seeking, but it's not guaranteed.
So when you say they have to go, is that to be called a park ranger officially, or is that to perform certain duties as a park ranger?
Yeah, they have some civil
Liability.
civil liability, but also civil
Authority?
authority.
Oh, okay, so there is an official ranger designation, got it.
Would this also include, I guess, the apparatus or the vehicle expense? Also?
It does not on this one. For the 109,000, it does not. That vehicle is actually in the item
So it's just
request.
wages.
Wages, benefits, travel, training.
And same thing for the crew worker one.
So it is more affordable to roll out.
I just personal experience with Snohomish County Park Ranger, which is way more stretched than what we would have. There's a deterrent aspect of having a guy drive around. I don't know what, it doesn't elevate to a police officer vehicle, but it's park ranger. And I think if the public is aware that that is available or is actually in service, there's a value to that. the sense that when somebody knows they're watching, they can show up at any time. And I got, again, my experience with Snohomish County Park Ranger, witnessing things. And that there's value to them. And, I appreciate the restroom deal, but, we have a fair amount of vagrancy, I guess you might say, in our parks that needs to be monitored. And I don't know if the crew work would do that.
Or have the authority to do anything about it, other than pick up the phone.
Yeah, and we bring the police department with us.
Well, at the same time, you've got, if you have a park ranger doing what you're saying, we still train the crew workers, just, they're their park ranger, not pick up the phone.
In terms of the budget, it seems as though if we hired a park ranger in Q3, which I realize is like $3 that would be about the same cost as hiring a crew member in Q2.
So if you're gonna hire a park ranger, you wanna hire in Q1? Cause if you have to send them to school, that happens Q1-ish.
Oh, that's good.
And then they work for you for the rest of the year, right? If you hire them Q3, you really don't see their impact until the next year's summer.
We're super supportive of it. It's just logistically, how does that work? You think about one employee, what hours they gonna work. And the drive time between all of our parks, how long they're gonna stay in a particular park. You might, they'll figure out, well, there's more action between 3 and 5 at this park. Maybe they'll just split it up, but then you put in vacations and sick leave. Does one really make an impact? I think it would help. But to do it right, you probably need 2, and you just don't have the funds right now.
I totally hear that. I guess I worry if we're thinking like, oh, we need 2 to do it the very best we can, we're never gonna do it. We're never gonna prioritize money first, so I would be more in favor of figuring out how to get started, and I guess I really agree, Gary. I think we have such great parks and so many people enjoying our parks, and it's so visible, and there's such feedback from our community about, oh my gosh, there's all this stuff happening in parks and there's nobody here to sort of keep an eye on things. And I think just to respond to that community need would be huge in a visible way, like.
Our 3 problem parks are Lundin, North Cove, and Davies, right?
Sunset.
Yeah,
Sunset's there too.
Yeah, but it's closed right now.
Yeah, I mean, until it's opened up in a couple
Yeah.
weeks.
and we don't get a lot of problems with Lundin for some reason. Most of them are North Cove.
So those are, you're
What about
essentially
Frontier?
concentrating on 2 areas.
Right here.
How
Frontier
many
Heights
are
won't be open next year.
different.
So that's off the table.
tiers, more
I don't know,
like-
do we have a problem with the skate parks?
Well, we don't, so that's county's responsibility to respond to
I'm
that.
assuming our guy would, or a person would probably help by there once in a while. Just to show them
Maybe,
presence.
well, they wouldn't have the enforcement capability there
We
because
don't.
it's not our park. But
So you're down to 2 main parks then.
then, the other thing I have to think about is we're also adding a 1.5 long, mile-ish of park next year. In addition to improving our Frontier Heights Park. I get it, like I would love to add the parks ranger. But what do you take away from? Do you take away from another position? Do you just add the park ranger and then our down and right arrow goes down and righter?
I'd like to see what kind of dollar damage we're seeing in our parks first. Because if it's more than $40,000. I'm all for it. If it's $8,000, I can probably buy that argument.
I would, and without seeing the numbers, I bet it's more than 40,000.
I would
Because
say so.
I was do with just some of the door handles and door damage, some of
Exactly.
those were
Toilets.
$10,000, and so I would definitely.
Door handle?
So there was multiple door handles.
Oh, okay.
Walls and
Yeah.
things.
Yeah.
It's just something I saw and I was like, I saw that.
Well,
in the
maybe
line.
I saw that stolen.
And
No, you didn't.
you know, just walk into the bathroom in North Cove, you can see how many holes are on the wall because crap gets ripped off. Every time that happens, it's.
So-
4,000, 5,000.
So really, we're talking about citizen behavior here. In reality. But if you, then that's citizen behavior is, okay, the vandalism is also a safety aspect to that. Then there's also, if you go down just a couple of lines down there for the police officer, the traffic officer, there's a big. Citizen behavior, safety aspect to having a traffic officer. So I am more inclined to spend money on a traffic officer than I am for a park ranger, although I'd like to see both. However, I think that for safety's sake, the way things are going and the data that we're collecting right now on traffic, it would behoove us to look at that very closely.
The traffic officer.
Yeah.
To go back to your question about how you pay for it, I think if you eliminate the crew worker and you look at what you're gonna save in vandalism, I think that pays for the park ranger.
So your problem with getting rid of the crew worker is we're adding X amount of parks next year, new parks. And now, when you look at Sarah's data on FTEs, we should be at the end of next year at 2. And so if we don't add one this year, then next year we gotta look at adding 2 to be at that data point. And so then by adding parks, we add additional parks maintenance issues by not adding the parks maintenance.
But what kind of issues would we be looking at with the shortfall in crew workers?
You see it right now, where the vegetation isn't managed up to what people expect on South Lake Stevens Trail. The grass isn't mowed as often as it should at some of the other locations like Frontier or smaller locations, but we're consistent at North Cove. So you get parks starting to be treated a little bit different, and we get complaints from citizens or from council regarding the appearance. So it just affects how quickly repairs are made and our efficiency to keep up on stuff.
So then for me, I guess it's what one makes the parks collectively look worse, the vandalism and that behavior, or, you know, unkept lawn.
And I think that all comes down to what is the standard for parks and what does city council want to see out of parks? Do you want meticulously maintained parks, or are you okay with having things grow longer, not look as great, have longer for repairs, longer for removal graffiti?
I guess I go back to the first question I asked, the fact that you as a department had a conversation within your team to talk about what the priority was. And as a team, you felt like the park ranger was a higher priority.
That is correct. One of the other questions I would have, and maybe this is a chief question, however, is when we did see a flare up in parks last year. He appointed his officers to be in parks, and they did spend a lot of time in parks. Is that something that can continue during the spring and the fall when the sun's out?
Right, we're at 75% limited staffing right now, every day, 75%, 3 guys on, and they're answering calls right now, and our calls increasing, so. it all
I
depends on when it-
don't want your 3 guys at the park. You know what I mean? Like, I just feel like,
It's domestics or parks, what do you want?
In domestic swings.
Domestic ones, because I have to respond to those.
Yep.
Like we pointed out, vandalism, like most of that occurs at night, and so
It's not
like
gonna
the
be-
park ranger. I mean, they're gonna be working during the day, so I don't know if that's gonna be a big deterrent, if that's our main goal.
The most we see is in the afternoon, so it's after school gets let out until right as sun has
When
gone.
Ellis MS or North Lake Middle School gets let out, that's when we start having the problems.
And
That's
maybe-
about.
well, let's not let them know.
There are other
Or let 'em in.
conversations happening at the school level and
Sure.
things that we had talked about weren't able to implement. Are there some just faculty members at school that would want a part-time after school job where they can come down to the park? They know the kids, they know the faces, they're gonna behave around. So there's other things. There's churches that have come in and started activating the areas. So we are trying different things.
How is that any different than a crew worker filling that role? I mean, I guess there's the personal relationship, but as far as enforcement capability.
The crew worker, they're just not trained to deal with behavior.
Are we
It's
assuming
not their
that
specialty?
volunteers would be?
Teachers.
Okay.
So, you know, ideally it would be a full-time, this is just me thinking, I don't have to talk about this. Ideally, we'd have a full-time park ranger. And then you'd also have a part-timer for 3 or 4 months during the summer to supplement that person. Right, and then that full-time park ranger is working for us year-round and during the slow times, during the winter, maybe they're doing some maintenance. So I mean, we can get a little more bang for buck out of a park ranger on the maintenance side, but they wouldn't be truly dedicated to park maintenance either. But during the slow time, they could do some.
And I realize there's a lot to talk about.
Yeah.
That's.
And I'd be happy to bring back financials and do an internal audit for maintenance and costs.
Yeah, I think we need that, but, because I think Gary's right. We need to see what the difference is, what the balance is.
Yeah.
And, you know, I mean, I understand where you're coming from on your budget. I get that. And I know we have, what, half a dozen, maybe a little bit more, maybe a dozen other requests from the department. And I understand, I think, in my own mind, how you went about, you know, cutting chaff, but at the same time, I'm looking at a couple of them that's here, like the traffic officers, I think are important.
But absolutely.
But and I'm not
but even
diminishing, I'm not diminishing park ranger crew, I'm not diminishing anybody.
But the problem with the traffic officer, Jeff, correct me if I'm wrong, if we gave him that spot, he's still gonna fill patrol first.
Right.
And we already have a traffic officer spot open.
It's just gonna sit.
What?
It's just gonna sit, I mean, it's.
Yeah,
it's just
I mean,
gonna
you're,
sit there.
you're gonna fill patrol first. And then, you know, your traffic guy, unless you have a different plan on that, Jeff.
No, it's about what it is you gotta fill patrol until they get up there. I got 2 in the academy right now that are not gonna be back in mid-year next year. They'll be available to fill those vacancies. So right now, patrol's a priority because I'm a minimum 75% of the time. So the reason we asked the traffic position is to dedicate it to that. So when I get ready to fill it, I don't have to come back and ask for traffic because they have to pay specialty positions. That is a specialty position that gets extra funding. So that's why I want to dedicate it as a traffic officer. So when I'm ready to fill it, I can fill it, without having to go back and readjust it.
But we already have a dedicated position that's being used on patrol right now.
Oh,
That I'm planning on filling next Saturday, my Saturday.
So this would bring us up to 2 traffic officers that everything was full.
Yeah, say you would have 2 vacant traffic officers and all the patrols are full. And then you ask the question, the 2 patrols that council wanted to go, the 2 patrol officers council wanted to go into the budget last year that was just discussed to go ahead and vote for, they're not funded at all. They're just ghost FTEs at this point.
I understand.
And so
that.
do
I
you
understand
fill
that we're
those
looking
2
at
before
that
you
and
fill the
asking.
traffic that you wanted, or I guess that's the question.
Didn't even know, I mean, those are available, but
I know.
they've been ghosted.
They've never been discussed because you're not.
I
there,
tried to hire enough.
Right.
I hired 8 officers since the first of the year.
So I mean, we could do a ghost traffic spot so that it's there and again, the truckload of great cops shows up, but.
Or they can also come back for a budget. amendment,
Yeah,
same
right,
thing.
exactly.
Absolutely.
And that's kind of the big thing is we have all these ghost positions there that aren't funded. I mean, a police officer position is about $1 million over a 6-year period. And so you're talking $3 million if we fill all 3 of these ghost positions.
It feels,
over that 3-year.
it feels sort of big, like it
Yeah.
feels hard to kind of wrap my arms around, knowing that the ghost positions are not funded, we haven't approved funding, it doesn't feel authentic.
It doesn't actually look very good.
It gets where Barb and I are trying to track this stuff and.
And Anya, we're
I
always
just,
like.
yeah, I know,
FTEs on
yeah,
there?
but you got 3 staff members trying to keep track of where we're at, what we're trying to do, it's.
So why don't
When
we,
we get there, can we get there?
right, so why, do we have others, besides the 2?
The other ones that we had, I think, were the intern positions that had no funding as well last year. And so those are technically ghost positions as well. The FTE availability was there, but no funding.
So I think it makes sense to keep them on our 5-year plan. So that when the truck does show up, we go, oh, it's not 5 years out, we got, we can do it now.
So optimistic.
I'm a little engine can, little engine, little train.
Little engine that could.
Little engine that could. Little engine that could.
Going on the mayor's point, I've got
Implement
2
ban.
explorers right now that are turning dates that went out during the pandemic that are getting ready to apply. I've got a third person that mentioned to me yesterday that they're applying, so it could happen. It just takes us a few months to get them through the process.
Yeah. All right.
So I got a question about that.
That's that.
When somebody says they're applying and then you gotta send them to the academy.
It depends on their lateral, entry level, advanced.
I understand, but if they tell
Entry
you
level.
they're, entry level, they're applying and you're gonna send them to the academy, they need to come, they come back to us.
And then you have to talk about how long it actually takes them to get into the academy.
Right now it's about 45 days.
Yeah, I understand.
That's actually not bad.
It's not, they've moved it up, and our Skagit County one hasn't even started, that starts November 8th. So once they open up that's another 30 positions, so it could even be sooner. Their goal is to get them ready 30 to 45 days once it's the day of hire. To get them in the academy started.
How long do
Better
they have
than
to
the
stay
9
with us after they come back? From the academy,
5 minutes.
okay. I think you're like, they come back to us, but then they're free to.
Yeah,
Just free to get FTO and do all that
yeah,
stuff.
they have to come back for FPO, so that's about 14 weeks once they come back. That's why it said, like Lanto, who just went to the academy, he won't be ready till April or May of next year.
Okay.
Because he doesn't graduate till December the 21st, and 14 weeks after that, he's got to go through the field training.
But you know, Ryan, it says a lot, if you've noticed, like the last several, many of our hires are laterals. And from bigger agencies, says a lot that they want to come.
No, that question wasn't a knock against us or our police, but it was more just piggybacking off of that. If you're gonna invest in them, what's our return period?
You talk to the wife, don't talk to the office. So,
Yeah, well, I'm keeping track of all our qualified, so I have park ranger position listed, and do a little more work on that, bring back some additional information. Of course, we're gonna pull the nuisance on vandalism, put it up to that.
That includes staff.
Did you want to give a quick rundown on your no situations on why, or are there other questions? I guess, how does everybody feel about the rest of
Yeah, what's your thoughts on the rest of these positions?
the rest of the positions that are not
That
being
are-
funded in the mayor's
Yeah.
recommendation?
Yeah.
I guess I'd like to hear what was your thought process.
That's what I would rather hear too. because I
One
don't
was
wanna
budget.
second guess.
Well, my biggest one is budget. Just trying to. We could fund this whole thing, and as you saw the numbers, there was another $2 million against the budget, right? For everything, which I would love to be able to do that, it's just. That, just not having the money to do everything we would really like to do. So having said that, you know, doing some of the reclass stuff, I thought the record specialist was like full-time. Was that a half-time Q2?
Yes, the records management specialist.
Yeah, I thought we said full, because my concern on that is we're gonna give Kelly these extra supervisory duties. But yet, she's still gonna have to do records. I thought we said half a
The
full-time.
full-time one we talked about was the administrative assistant. We said we're gonna move that to full-time and pay for half of it out
Out
of
of permits,
permits.
yeah.
So that was what we discussed after the fact.
I thought the record.
I do, because I do have concerns about that, obviously. I mean, ideally, of course, I want a full-time person, but,
Label, I mean, it looks like it's labeled full-time.
I know,
on the org
but,
chart.
and I'm also worried about finding somebody. Recruiting is.
That's the thing, there's so many people.
Yeah, and there's
What do
so
you
much work.
consider a half-
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's actually. full-time. And maybe I didn't.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, there's still, yeah,
the,
yeah. they're-
you know, you'll see, you know, some of I had concerns on the IT side. And I will take a hit on not listening to Troy over the last couple of years on the hardware side and not upgrading our hardware. That's what caused our blow up. So we focused some money on that, on fixing that problem on the supply side, and then yeah, the rest of that just comes down to I got $400,000 to spend.
Can you maybe elaborate on the safety and training coordinator, and maybe I missed this?
So the safety training,
Well, I was gonna say, Anya talked about it for the overall city safety issue, but in my mind, it's more of a public works issue. And on the infrastructure side, I'm just wondering if maybe we can juggle some. I know it's important, but from a public works standpoint, it's really important. And again, you're probably addressing some of that in your accreditation stuff, but just wondering if we could maybe kind of split some of that between public works and storm drainage.
As far as funding.
Yeah.
Yeah, funding sources.
I heard that as more of a liability issue. Am I wrong about
The
that?
training.
Yeah, the training coordinator. I heard that was a liability issue to not have it.
Yeah. I
Sure.
mean, it does become a
Right,
liability
I'm
issue.
talking about actually getting that in place, he's funding it.
Funding it from a different account, stormwater, general fund or whatever it is.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like we got more money in storm drainage funds, so.
Yeah, could we pull that from storm and streets?
I would have to know more about the position.
We would need to have it.
It has
more
to be
dedicated
allocated.
For that, those employees.
Versus all city.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, it would seem to
The
me a lot of the
stormwater fund
safety
can't
issues,
pay
so
for the
public works can apply to safety issues.
So public works
Public
is
works.
street, storm, parks, general fund technically. That's, I mean, if you're gonna utilize all of those, if they're gonna be training all of those people that are in public works, it's gonna come out of all of those funds. Now, it could be more stormwater related, you could, I just don't know what it is.
My initial thought is we would be, if that position could be like 50% general and then 25 streets and 25 storm, and then be like 50% public works, because they would do a lot of safety training in public works. And then it would capture all the citywide training programs there's would do, so it could make me look at that. We also have a contract for safety training right now. For NWFF, which we looked at when considering this position, we would down. I guess we would cut that contract probably in half or more than that, and only use them for very specific training where they are the expertise with subject matter expert, like.
Yeah, confined space entry.
Maybe confined
But even
space.
that we could do in-house.
And so what we would do in-house would be, all your first aid, work zone safety,
Pathogen.
bloodborne pathogens, all the things that we could get an internal staff certified for, we could do that and use this person for that. And then in addition to the citywide training programs.
And they could get certifications. In space entry, all of the other things that NWF provides. So I mean, I guess you and I hadn't really talked about it on, but I think there could be a significant reduction in that NWF contract. A large part of this, some of it could come from the stormwater utility, for sure.
Yeah.
Says.
No, you know me, I need all the help I can get. Well, let's take a look at that spot. We'll take a look at that spot.
So the records management specialist is in here as part-time, full-time Q2 would be about 91,000.
That's gonna be all general.
Not completely, it will be allocated out slightly to. Basically, how many records do you, and it'll be allocated out to street and storm as well, but it's gonna be very small, like most of it, it's probably 72, 75%.
Oh, I thought you were like the police record special.
Oh, no, this is the records management specialist. It was in there as part-time, so full-time would bring that up.
Yeah.
Nearly double. A little more.
Any other hot positions?
And 91 because it starts Q2.
And 91 because it starts Q2.
Yeah.
So let's spend more time.
Okay, so I'm hearing relook at the park ranger. I'm hearing records management full-time. And I'm hearing safety training coordinator. Relook also.
Mr. Mayor, can I interrupt? Just make a brief, short case for the facility crew leader. Keep it really short. As you know, I've mentioned it earlier, we have many facilities. Gene was just mentioning that the current city hall building needs to be looked at. Some of these needs are there. We continue to add facilities. We're going, this need is going to grow, as you can imagine. We got new city hall building. We're going to move the Portland over to public works. At some point, our streets and facilities supervisor cannot do both of those jobs. It's doing both. And it's becoming impossible. It's not becoming impossible this year. But it would be,
That might be a 2025.
Yeah.
priority.
we're certainly not gonna be in that position this year.
And I think your staffing, strategic staffing actually asks for a supervisor.
Yeah.
I guess Anya had mentioned earlier versus like me. So I think it's in this strategic staffing future plan. So I have, look at park ranger, keeping the crew worker. Records management specialist, I made full-time in my background data, and then the safety training coordinator. That's what we're looking at right now.
Okay, so we'll relook at those spots.
And to verify, we're pulling our phantom positions. Our phantom police officer positions.
No sense to have them.
What's that?
Or
Makes no
those
sense to have
two,
Yeah,
those two patrol ones.
I mean,
Yeah,
You want me to do
he
what?
said there's a
I
truck
heard
coming.
Brett says that the bus is coming.
The bus is coming. Lots of cops. Little engine choo can.
What color is
Sprinter
it?
van.
Sprinter van.
Rainbow.
So we'll remove those for now, and then if Jeff gets this van full, then come back for a budget amendment.
Yeah.
Plus then look at the information. Okay. Okay, let me move on.
Just so he doesn't quit recruiting.
Oh, I don't.
Oh, there's only 7 of us that all retire at any.
I was gonna say. He's never stopped.
Might be eligible, but you're not getting.
I say, what's this us stuff?
I'm gonna pass by the proposed budget position summary. Anya already kind of went through some of this. I think you had said if we did them all, it was like 135, I think, positions for 2024. So in the mayor's budget, it ended up being 126 full-time and then 12 part-time, including seasonals. But that changed a little because it was 127 full-time because city clerk would have a full-time and one less part-time.
So something also to remember, we have how many slots left at City Hall? 2? 2 desks left? 1?
2 or 1? I thought it was 1.
We have one shared space.
Oh, yeah. One shared space.
You're gonna add a full-time records or public records.
That'd be an
Full-time-
So she'll be, that'll probably be
Yeah.
Kelly.
He said, she said.
I'll move into the shed.
Oh, my gosh.
Record specialist.
Wait, but the recs for
Very low cost
Of
officers.
the Clerks Institute when they found out we had a
Called
shed.
pallet shelter.
That's all I even wanted to talk
I
about.
got something for you. Move them out to North Cove Park, and reduce all the problems.
All right, let's keep going.
All right. Again, this is in your packet as well, so I know it's not the easiest thing to see. These are just the yeses at this point. Let me actually. Does this include the no's as well? Yeah. So this one, the full page includes all the yeses and the nos of all of the things that were requested. As you can see, it was $2.2 million in requests. So getting back to the ones that have kind of gone in, mayor's proposed budget, you can see,
Actually, Barb,
Yeah.
I think you're gonna have to go to the other one because if we're talking about some of these other positions. For example, the parks ranger, you'd have to add in that.
yeah, the one down at the bottom says no, so that would be a yes, so $8,500 a year for a lease for that one. All the rest of the lease replacements, I just put into one line because they wouldn't fit on the screen otherwise. I think there's 5 additional trucks in that lease replacement program line on the bottom. I just put them all into one so that we not have to deal with all of that. Did you want to go through any of this specifically? The first few in HR, wellness programming, external investigate, so the internal investigator budget is sort of a placeholder. If we need it for internal investigations, we would hire somebody to actually help do those. I think Anya mentioned
So-
external training budget.
Yeah, so what that means is if we have an employee issue that we have to investigate, right now Anya does that and it takes a lot of the time. So this would be someone else doing that for us.
I really should have my mouth.
Would you do that anyway?
I want to just leave this one. Yeah, I'm almost there. Okay. If you're a little better, get you a little better look at some of these here. ADA program supplies, that's just for we've had a couple people, I think, ask for ADA compliance hearing or stuff in the council chambers, and so that's just a minimal, just supplies for that. Replacements, the next large section is IT, as the mayor mentioned. He feels he's been a little lax in our security of our city, so this is a lot of that stuff.
That's a big thing to see.
He has, he was much more comfortable with our security than Troy was. And turns
Well,
out,
I've been very conservative, like, on just infrastructure in general, and we've had to be very creative because the city's been growing, we used to have a lot of funds, so, when it came to getting, surplusing equipment, we typically ran to like 5 years, resurface that for a utility box, which then runs into problems with leasing stale, and so like Nick's really not comfortable having to rely on critical monitoring systems that's repurposed old stuff, and it has to be just as reliable as a primary, so there's just a lot of things that he's like, no, you're really not doing a good job or good service, and it brings a risk in there when we do have an outage. So that's why we're trying to like look at our tooling in general and figuring out a cycle where we have our primary data center has about a 3-4 year replacement cycle that gets moved to secondary in the tertiary for our testing environment. So it'll help us to keep the equipment at least on the ability to be supported and maintain infrastructure, and then help us to maintain the integrity. That's just a good thing.
Sorry, Mark, keep going.
This public art,
public art.
yes, for what, 25,000?
Yes, this is a program we want to kind of get going. Like I mentioned, we can take it out of our public arts fund, which has some funding in it from 1% from projects, but also contributions from the general fund. Both Gene and Russ have this in their requests, and so I'd like one of them to actually kind of tell you about this stuff and how we would use it.
I will, unless Gene wants to go, but, so we have a beautification plan. And we do have set aside dollars every year for beautification. Those have typically gone to wayfinding signs, gateway signs, and this augments that. So this because when we do new large public projects, we want to make sure we have an enticing town. We also know we have several, we'll say, areas in the city that are available for vandalism through graffiti, like some long stretches of blank wall. I'm not suggesting painting murals on washed-off infrastructure, but we do have some other walls that might be city controlled that we can do murals on those as we build out new roundabouts. For example, the one downtown, we're going to need a piece of public art in that. So that's really what that's trying to do, is just implement our beautification plan and make sure we have enough dollars to actually do something.
But those are from a specific fund, so for example, we're not choosing between public art and park.
Yep. Okay. This would come from the general.
So it come from the general fund into the art fund.
Okay,
Is this tied at all to Parks and Arts Foundation?
Parks and Arts Foundation would have a role in this, but they would not be the holder of these dollars.
Right, no, I got that.
So just some of the bigger takeaways off of that page, you got the EDS update. For 100,000, that's across, public works and streets and the rest of the department.
We are always very.
Dollars to update the ed. Yes, we're probably doing that in house.
We lack the horsepower.
Are they that out of date?
They're from 2008. 2008, 90.
I'm sorry.
No, they're
I think 09, 2009.
2009.
But I can pull up.
Check. 2008 or 2009.
So we're
That's out of date.
rewriting the entire code or what? I mean,
So, for example, we're gonna update it so that it can accommodate recent code revisions for unit lot subdivisions, for example, have substandard roadways. The EDs were drafted in 2008 when sort of everything was pretty straightforward and simple, so we have a more complex development.
We want to make it consistent with the current ADA laws and the stormwater requirements and environmental compliance. So we have clear and consistent regulations that we can convey to developers and also for our capital projects. So we're all on the same page and it's really clear what's required to meet state and federal regulations. But then it would also be looking at our our municipal code to ensure that there's nothing conflicting each other. Typically, our code will override our eds, so we want to ensure that they work together well and that we can easily update the eds and maybe not have to go through the more formal review for our code updates. For us to continue to update our eds on a more regular basis than just wait. Years.
And we're also gonna be integrating sewer standards again. You'll hear that theme a lot today. They are looking to the future. What does that look like? So we need to be ready when we take over that agency. That we've looked at their standards, and I guess they're in the process of going through some updates. So we want to make sure what we take in the future meets their needs, but also if we have some divergent opinion on efficiencies that we're looking at those, so we're ready when that happens.
I would add one more thing. You know, the city is just wrapping up a $600,000 EDA project. Some of that can be attributed to output events. It's money well spent. So Laura, on the subject of ADA requirements. I'm interested in getting audible crosswalk. We've got a few blind people and I've had one that has contacted me basically about community transit, a problem with community transit, but what it was included in that is how she gets to community transit. She's going to cross a sidewalk that doesn't have anything audible. So we need to look at all of our crossings and see if we can add the audible portion to our crossings.
Well, I think I'll answer one part of that. I would do the other part. The first thing is that person should fill out an ADA accommodation request with the city, so we know where they are walking, and so we can address.
If they're going across Mundine, but
Okay.
I can get it specifically.
Please, yeah, and then
So it's an ADA what?
accommodation request.
So we have a website for ADA transition plan, which has a lot of information there, and then there's also a link to the ADA accommodation form on that same website. If you want that.
How would, this is off topic, sorry, but maybe we can talk later. How would someone who is sight impaired be able to know that that's there?
So I think that as part of the ADA transition plan, we did have a consultant go through and evaluate all of our facilities, including pedestrian push buttons and signals.
I guess what I'm asking is how do they know that it's available on the website?
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought you meant the push button.
Oh,
on
no.
the street. Yeah.
Well, I think they have web browsers that are customized for them to read the text on them.
Okay.
Great question. I thought the same thing. Right here.
But again, if they need help, they can call us. We'll fill the form out for them, whatever it takes.
Another part of the ends update is that we pride ourselves on doing like 2 reviews on submittals for platform type of stuff, and get out the comments as we can out the first review, and then hopefully the second for there. Now we got new legislation that has come out that is going to require us to get things done, for who's done within a time period. With old eds, it's tough to get there. We want developers to be able to come in, everything's on our website, up to date. They know exactly what they need to build to the standards. If they do that, they submit the first time, and that takes a lot of the extra money they gotta spend to revise the plans out of the equation, and it takes our staff time down. So that it touches a lot of the city departments.
Yeah, and I'll quickly add that I think Aaron wanted me just to mention that that is one of the elements that plays to ADA compliance with any of those push buttons. It is required to have a locator tone, so a visually impaired person can know and navigate to where those push buttons are. You're talking about Lundin and
2 lights on Monday.
the actual
Like
signal.
Parkway.
Yeah, and so in that particular case, if there's any signals that are on state routes, we'll be able to coordinate with WashDOT and they'll be responsible. I think they probably have a similar ADA accommodation form, so once they're notified of that, I think there are regulations that they are required to investigate and implement solutions and respond back to the customer if there's a particular request about the ADA.
Well, I'll circle back with this particular person because I'm still involved with her for the CT problem, so.
I will quickly mention too, when we went to the National APWA PWX conference, the Public Works Expo, just a couple weeks ago, there was a group of us that went. I did talk to a vendor who works on the pedestrian signals, and they have an app on their that they created, that I think the blind community is really excited about, that would work with their cell phone. And as they're walking around the city, it would give them clues and it would activate these push buttons. And they work together and then they would their phone would give them audible tones that say, you can cross this leg of this intersection. It gives a countdown timer. It was really cool. I was kind of excited.
Is that a
about
specific type of like button that we get?
You would need,
Go with this app?
yeah, we would need to, I think that they're trying to make it, they're in the process of making it more universal for all the different types of buttons, but I think right now it specifically works with their system. So it's something that we can look at when it comes to the traffic signals. WashDOT maintains all the signals on the state routes, and Snohomish County maintains all of our signals in the city, so we just would need to collaborate, but there's some cool technology that's coming.
We're interested in ADA. There you go. That's going, sorry.
Hey, I want to keep this going here,
Alright.
so we're on the track. So another big highlight off of that is we do not know what our stormwater pipes look like. So we want to put 300,000 towards a contract, CCTV and all our pipes, getting that information put into our GIS system, so we know what our stormwater pipes look like.
Is that the contract with the sewer district?
No, we would contract it. There's companies that's
They have the equipment. They do it all the time.
They're gonna get their sewer camera and the storm drainage pipe.
Right.
anyway.
And I think that's just the start of the program, to figure out what we have out there and.
Yeah.
They're gonna get numbers on what the actual multi-year program is gonna cost too.
Yeah.
Definitely a
You
multi-year
don't need to
program.
convince me, I just wonder if it's gonna be sorted.
Yeah, it'd be a great way to spend the money, but
We have to do some serious filtration.
they're busy doing their own things, so. The next, a couple of next big ones, we do the hunting treatment every year, this our mini excavator is out, so that we'd be buying a new mini excavator this next year also. Those are the big highlights.
There's 20 grand for flock cameras. How many
Yeah.
cameras is that?
That's 5 cameras. Our initial look with the flock thing said 23 cameras for the pink Cadillac plan. 23? Yeah, 27. That was the pink Cadillac. Let's take a look at what 5 does for us. That's the one.
I know there's a big one in here that the police have their take-home vehicle and future replacement in here. That is not recommended to go forward. I think that's probably one that Jeff wouldn't want us to jump over and not actually allow you to. Here,
just
but it's
future
not in.
program. Yeah, it's just a future, if we expand down to that campus, what does that look like for parking? That is some way to get the parking. I can't use my north parking lot right now for training because we're so full. With private cars and patrol cars trying to make that parking lot work. And I've got a public works. 7 parking there. For some reason.
You know, community transit has this really great
It's
thing
been
called
there.
a bus.
Every week. PW 57, I don't know if you're missing it, somebody stole it from you, but it's there. And then it might be the IT one.
Are there any, looking at that, is there any concerns, any questions? Why is there a no on that?
Well, yeah, I do have a question. Most of the tactical stuff or ballistic stuff for the police.
Yeah, would love to fund. We did fund out of that the rifle rated plates that go into their vests.
I'm sure they're excited about that.
Yeah. Would love to fund the rest of it, but just comes out of dollars.
You have some portable fingerprint scanners in here, some drug scanners, so they don't have to touch the drugs. Those are improved in there.
Sidewalk.
The sidewalk one was just to increase the budget. There is a $45,000 repair budget already. That wasn't fully spent in 2022, 2023. They're spending a little more than that. So we're starting with the 45,000. That's a base number. So it just didn't get increased to the 100,000. I had a feeling there was gonna be a question about that. I know you guys are very, very in tune with the sidewalks, so. Anything else in there or? I mean, this is pretty much how I have my presentation is you guys talk about the mayor's budget. How do you want these recommendations? Are you feeling fairly good with how the things are moving forward at this point? I know you guys know we have a kind of a shortened period. I do have a few more presentations where we can talk more about this. I think this is probably a more comfortable way to talk about it than in council meetings. So if you can, if you have questions and you want to grill the mayor.
Yeah,
Transportation plan implementation.
That is also part of the ed stuff, right?
Well, it's related, but it's separate. So after we get done with our comprehensive plan update, we're going to have to redo our traffic impact fee program to ensure it matches the level of service. We need to update our streets code, our municipal code, again, just to make sure it's all consistent with our periodic comprehensive.
hey Barb, would you scroll down a little bit? So
Down here.
Troy, let me explain this. So.
Yeah.
So the IT issue. Is IT is smart because they have redundant systems. And the IT problem we had was we weren't redundant enough and one of our big pieces broke. So if you don't know, and I'm not gonna get it completely right, but that's okay. So
Like, don't intervene.
you have one system that does like your current operations with IT. And then you have another system that's like the backup, and then you have like another system that's like a backup. And then you have a security system that does security for the whole thing, and then you have another little system that's testing. All of those pieces are supposed to be in different places. So for example, one of them is currently one of them is at the police station, one of them is at the county, and one of them should be at Public Works. But it's not there yet because we don't have the backup generator yet, and we don't have air conditioning in the room it's supposed to be in, but we're working on that. Why I'm telling you that is there's a system here, and several of those IT funding is to make sure that's set up and fixed. So I don't think it's fully funded, but I don't want to have what happened to us happen again. And that's why I want you as council members to understand, it's not just a computer sitting at City Hall. It's multiple computers doing kind of the same thing, but in a redundant sphere in different locations. In case one goes down, you've got redundancy and pick up space. So. Did I do okay, Troy?
I was gonna say, is that pretty good?
Well done.
Yeah.
That was your mayor's
And
explanation
I
of
think
IT.
that's why it kind of tells you that there's about $300,000 or more. Actually just for IT stuff this year. That's in the mayor's budget of that 1.2, and that's just the additional requests. I mean, all of not say his, all of our annual renewals, all of our current systems, all of our SharePoints, everything, that is almost $300,000 a year in itself. And that's why another thing we were always trying to look at our software systems. Is there a way we can lean these up? A couple things that we just talked about is my financial software, Springbrook, they actually have a secondary system, a Cirrus system that is still part of our system that we can go in and utilize. In the Cirrus system, they're doing upgrades more quickly than they are with our enterprise system. So they have new features and functions. And one of the things they have in there is timesheets. So we might be able to get rid of NovaTime as a secondary outside timesheet system because we already have it in Springbrook. It's just not available in our enterprise. So we have to start kind of utilizing Springbrook. This is all the kind of things that we're always trying to figure out is, are there things out there that we don't have access to or that we can have access to that will simplify and reduce some of these additional costs that we have. So NovaTime is an additional cost we pay every year, but Springbrook is included in it. So now we just have to transition to this function. And so just one of the additional things we're always trying to do with IT, what's creep? Is that what it's called?
Yeah.
IT creep.
Cirrus is marketed as an ERP system, which covers a lot of different stuff as well. So there is some relating to other things on there, fixed assets. There's
Asset
a lot of,
management.
customer relations management, that's all that stuff. So it's kind of moving it around.
They do say that they are going to upgrade enterprise at some point to all these things, but Cirrus is the front runner.
Okay, no other showstoppers on that page.
The only thing I would say is at some point I'd like to talk more about the block system, but I will hold off because I know Chief has been waiting very patiently. He's got a family thing he wants to get to, so I'll keep my mouth shut for now.
Yeah, okay. Cool. What's your next slide, Barb?
Basically just our,
Let's do maybe 5 minutes.
I'm almost done.
Oh, you're
This is
almost
slide 13 of 14. I'm out of here. I'm done. So basically, I just wanted to bring forward our forecast again. And one thing I want to say, obviously, so you have your 2024 base budget, and this has changed since I gave it to you. Sorry about that. On Tuesday, I went back and I was looking through our forecast, and there was some odd calculations in the forecast model that we have. We've had this forecast model. We got it from FCS in 2016. We paid a lot of money for it. So we've just been reutilizing it, and there's some complications and functions and error functions that are going on in the background. And so I actually removed a lot of what the forecasting model had shown in the past and did the average increase every year that we've seen for the past 4 to 6 years. And it's about 4% increase in expenditures in every fund or every department. And so there was a couple in there that were an 18% increase. And I'm like, there's no reason for planning and community development to show an 18% increase this year. There's nothing in here that should show that. And so there was some corrections that were made. And so basically we went from our budget that we thought we were going to have, which was a negative, I think we were at a negative $200,000 or negative $100 and something thousand, to showing that we have an ending balance in 2029 of about $3 million for the base budget. And so there were some strange things in there, and I basically am wiping that out. And Matthew doesn't know, but I'm going to task him with creating us a new financial forecast model here for next year, so we can actually keep it. We just need to wipe it clean and start over and do something a little easier to use. So this just kind of shows that we do have, and 2024 is still the same as we talked about. We're still only looking at another $600,000-700,000 available. This is just with everything that we have calculated in, it's pushing our down line as what do you call it? Doom and gloom, as Kim likes to call it, or gloom and doom line. It's just pushing it further out. Like
The one chart you could get rid of.
you know, Mayor or previous Mayor Spencer used to ask if we could flip it upside down, and I said, sure, I can make the high numbers at the bottom, and it'll go up. That's the only way I can do that. So there was a slight change. Like I said, I've kind of updated the numbers. We'll keep looking at it and see if there's anything else in there to change. But some of the right off the bat, it was like, where are these 18-20% increases coming from one year to the next? There's zero reason for that. So anyway, FYI.
So then, oh, I'm sorry, just put it in the parking lot and talk about later. Looking at this makes me think about revenues, which makes me think about money in the city of Southeast, which makes me think about the ILA with the city of Everett and the water line. Can we at some point
Really close.
update on that? Okay,
Yeah.
great.
Where's Lori with our parking lot?
Thanks.
I think Jean's got a parking lot going.
I do.
So
How much per parking place?
Yeah, he's all over it.
The 20,000.
Right.
And so this is just our street and stormwater. I just wanted to show you the difference between the base budget and the mayor's proposed. There weren't a lot of differences in this. I didn't see any crazy percentage increases or anything in the forecast, but I would say in the street, as I mentioned, there are not very many. There's not very much of a dedicated funding source in streets. It's motor vehicle fuel tax and then the 28% property tax. And yes, the property tax could go up. I know in the past years we were trying to bring it down, but we've never been able to do that. As you can see, streets are pretty expensive, especially since sidewalks also come out of that. And pavement preservation every year. We have pavement preservation in there at a base of $400,000 a year, and that's on top of the ADA, the transportation benefit money. And so that's already in there every year as a base dollar amount. There's also, I think, traffic striping in there this year, as that hasn't been done in a while. And so there aren't a whole lot of capital requests in this, as I mentioned, the street budget, but some of those things like pavement preservation, some of the big things are in there. So as you can see, we need to kind of keep an eye on our street fund. As I mentioned, it's not horrible if it goes negative, as long as it's not doing it within the next 4 years or so. Then you want to kind of start, I don't know, thinking about how other revenue sources things, but, and then stormwater is all over the place. There in the forecast, it actually includes some future capital projects and things that were lined out when we did our rate study. And so that's kind of why it kind of fluctuates all over the place. It doesn't have any of our actual capital in it. It has capital purchases in this right now, but as I mentioned, it doesn't have any of our capital projects specifically for 2024 budgeted in here, so.
Barb, on the storm drainage quickly, why would the revenue pop from 6 million to 10 million in 1 year, 24 to 25?
I believe it's a grant. So there's some grants plugged into some of these things. I will double check on that.
So
That's
we-
a lot
we
of
know
money.
We're getting a grant in the year 25.
Sorry.
Yeah. Might have forecasted the grant.
I think there's some, yeah, I think there's some unsecured grants forecasted along with the capital projects. And so that's why your revenues go up and your expenditures also went up.
Yeah.
So I think we tried to forecast those together, but
Good.
yeah, I know, it made me think, wait a minute. And that is all I have. I really just wanted to get you guys all talking about what you wanted to see in the budget and the mayor's recommendations
And we're talking about capital projects later.
on the 26th. On the 26th, we don't have a council meeting next week, which I'm really glad because I don't think I would have had time to put that packet together. So yes, 26th.
Any major questions for Barb or me or staff on that presentation? All right, let's 6-5, come back with 91st Street revitalization. Going?
Bring us back, we're live.
Like,
All right, we're live. So let's, coming back from the break, anything came up during the break, any major concerns? Okay, perfect.
I
Right.
have one question.
Yeah,
So during the rest of the budget, we didn't talk about today, are we ever going to talk, are we going to talk about other revenue sources that we have?
that does come up down the road, right?
It's sort of, I mean, we can talk about it again later, but I mean, if that's something that you wanna talk about, that's probably a good time to do it.
I just figured it's gonna come up.
I mean, I had it in the presentation earlier, but
Yeah, I mean, the person you did on Tuesday, right? You had some other revenue,
Mhm.
so,
basically the utility taxes,
utility taxes, yeah.
utility taxes for the stormwater and for sewer. I don't know how we feel about that at this point.
Wasn't the other one, and I can't remember where we're at on that one, stormwater for the school district?
We already did that one. We have them fully compliant, paying in full. I think, was it Bothell? I think one of the other cities reached out to Shannon to find out how we went about doing that and had that accomplished because they've been trying to do the same thing for years as well. So
Yeah.
she sent them all the things that she put together, so that one is done.
But
we can put it on a workshop agenda.
absolutely, we can throw it on a workshop agenda, and if there's a revenue source that the council is looking at, wants to add as part of the budget, let's, yeah, take a look at it.
Let's do it.
Baked good sales,
Yep, you know, we've talked about park districts and park and rec districts and things, some of those were pretty. Limited and cumbersome for what you actually get out of them, so maybe Sarah has different ideas that she could bring forward to and how to do some of those things. You know, parking fees came up recently. To put in a parking lot, we charge fees for that. I didn't say it, I'm just asking.
Just beat the messengers. I think it'd be good to have it on an agenda and just like kind of, let's make sure we know what all is out there, what all the different, even the obscure stuff, and then start to have a conversation.
Not gonna get it,
Doesn't, not necessarily for 2024, but.
I like the flexible work technology piece. I know that some of the other ACE cities were talking about this, how they're funding other technologies, you know, we have enterprise applications that. And a couple of cities published a lot of these fees that they have the technology being associated with a lot of different services and I was, you know, I think I forwarded it off to you. I don't know how. Like take a look at that, make sure we're seeing that. How they can pull.
So we do charge technology fees on all of the permits through the permit track system. We don't charge currently, that's something that we have on our radar to look into is starting to pass on credit card fees, because our credit card fees are a good $80,000 a year, and we're absorbing those at this point, with the exception of permit tracks, basically. We are looking into that. It will entail getting some new hardware to go along with our software, because you have to break out those things, and our current receipt, the way we do our receipts, that kind of thing, don't actually break out the break out the credit card fee, and that is a requirement. And so we'd have to look into some new hardware for our receipt machines, but that shouldn't be too expensive either. So it's just stuff we're looking into and how we can actually bring in the more revenue to actually account for these things. So, sure. Thanks. Yep.
okay, so we can have a revenue discussion on a workshop. All right, Russ, let's kick this off with the 91st Avenue.
Okay, this will be your fun topic for the day, direct community engagement. So a little over a year ago, the council wanted to start talking about how do we improve 91st. And then you budgeted, put a budget together for last year. So just as a reminder, this is the scope of this project. So we're looking at the areas both north and south of 204 from about Market up Frontier Circle to approximately 13. And this was a graphic from our earlier Lake Stevens Center sub-area plan, which also did take a look at this as an implementation task to create more of a main street. And this would be sort of an expansion of that across the highway. Nope, it's in a PDF. It's not.
You know, there's
I can do this
there's a
stuff.
view. You can, no, there's
I know, but I can push this over. It'll help,
a view on phones.
well, a little bit.
Okay, let's just keep going.
Okay.
Okay, these were the goals of the project, is to create an inviting Main Street shopping district. And we wanted to better connect retail and residential areas and then develop a more pedestrian oriented streetscape with different amenities. Look at how do we safely accommodate bikes, vehicles, etc. along the corridor, and then look to where we can incorporate low impact stormwater development. And okay, last year or earlier this year, at your retreat, I showed you these slides. I won't spend a lot of time on them, but these are the existing conditions. And what these slides show is there are different right-of-way patterns along this entire corridor. So different widths, different existing sidewalk types, different types of landscape vegetation. And then as you get to the new intersection at the highway or past the highway, we show some of these new improvements. And then again, what happens as you go up Frontier Circle. But the big takeaway is the street pattern from south to north is not consistent, different widths of roadway, and again, different existing amenities. So again, the goal would be, how do we have a cohesive section or a couple of sections? And that's kind of where we landed in this project. It's how to do a couple of different types of street patterns. So one thing we've done is we've looked at what we're calling the commercial segment. So that would be the southern portion. And one of the things we're looking at is keeping the travel lane, keeping the bike lanes, or adding bike lanes, excuse me, travel lanes, and adding landscaping, as well as defining sidewalks. I think I'm on the wrong slide deck. This does not look correct. No, I guess it's, sorry. So this is a take on that. Option 1B, you keep that center travel lane, you keep the 2 lanes, and you do on-street parking. So that's one of the things we looked at. And then again, the enhanced landscaping. And in this example, you take the on-street parking and you push it to a joint use path on one side of the road and have a standard sidewalk on the other. So the on-street parking and the combined bike and sidewalk become the major different features of this.
Rose, did you say this movements go all the way south to 13?
North
North of 13. And south to
Market.
Thank you.
So these are some of the pros and cons, and somehow my slide deck is all messed up because it's not following the presentation. So we'll just go with it and get to the pieces when we get there. But this provides some of the pros and cons of these different road sections as we look at this commercial section. So we have, again, pros, the buffered sidewalk. We have the pedestrian lighting, new seating, designated bike lanes. And then we try to retain those existing trees that are along the east side of the corridor. With option 1A, the con would be your bike lanes are not buffered. They're narrower sidewalks. But there are still dedicated sidewalks. If you look at the other option, again, where you have the on-street parking, the sidewalk remain buffered. A lot of the common features, the big differences where you're putting the cyclists, which would be on the shared path on one side. And you have the landscaping, and then you have the street parking. The con is also, well, you do have the cyclists next to pedestrians, and that has some other issues. And it's a more expensive option, and you would need more right-of-way acquisition. If everyone can give me a minute, this is really not what I was expecting to be presenting, so I apologize if you can give me a minute. I will find
sure.
the correct
No problem.
slide deck. This is.
That's what happens when you're responsible for 150 slides.
Yes.
With no administrative help.
Yeah. Yeah.
Good
We're gonna
plug,
address
good
that
plug.
right. Nice.
Kelly, do you want to demo me?
Oh,
panel.
I'd be happy to demote you.
You've already been demoted.
Thank you. Now, when you promote me, do I get a coin?
No.
I'll go crazy if you get a coin.
Those are very hard to get. We talked about it.
I have, and I already have my first few recipients. And somebody may not get one.
Most projects built out of revenge are very successful, so.
That's not surprising.
Our clerk's coin will be very successful. I'm gonna.
Different in the presentation that's in your staff report. In the staff report, I provided a lot of detail talking about what the council had looked at their prior meeting, which were some of the assumptions that led to then these revised designs that have gone out to the public. And so with this presentation, what I want to share with you is some of the public input on these different design options. So we asked a series of questions. We put these out on our website. We had a public open house, and we talked directly to a couple of developers or commercial property owners along this corridor, really trying to push this information out. We also did at Aquafest, we had material that we shared to get survey results. So some of the questions we've asked is, we wanted to know, how does this corridor function for you in terms of the streets and vehicles, in terms of pedestrian use, bicycle use, and then how well does it function for those with either sight or mobility challenges? And you can see generally that people thought it functioned good to very good for vehicles and business access. But as far as accessibility for pedestrians, those with challenges or cycling didn't function very well. Then we asked some questions about which design elements do you think will improve the appearance? And what was interesting to look at is that landscaping scored really high, obviously sidewalks did, and then lighting. And then when we looked at the packet again, when we looked at the council's preferences, there's a description in there of the 2 tests that you took at your last retreat. And then those were synthesized to sort of ground truth the responses when you were asked a statement and you looked at a picture. And again, all of those became inputs that built out this survey and these design options. So then we also asked the public about the goals of the project. Then we asked about what is your preferred option? And for this commercial section, there was almost even response. Both options were equally preferred. And so then as we get to sort of the written comments, we need to sort of extrapolate. And that's where, sort of council has a say in how do you rank all of the priorities for what's most important. So then we asked, well, your preferred option, what do you think it will improve? Universally, improve walkability, cyclists, better connectivity, midway, more public amenities, kind of midway. That, and then I have included this in the packet, and hopefully you've been able to look at this slide, and I won't spend a lot of time on it, but these are where we ask very specific questions of the public, and there's a pretty good description of this in your staff report that summarizes the comparison of these findings. But again, for this commercial section, it was about half and half. People like the idea of providing the bicycle lanes, the cycling, the bicycle and the pedestrian lanes. Those were big improvements. People wanted to see enhanced landscaping, and there seemed to be less of a preference for on-street parking, which also coincided with the survey that the council had done earlier in the year. Then there were some other comments that became interesting. They were sort of outside of it, it's why we asked quick questions, but there were questions posed about the existing intersection at 204. How does this project impact that existing intersection? And then as we get to the northern section, how does this impact Vernon to 9, that crossing?
Yeah, I think the other thing to think about here is making sure that we've got good walkability biking, because you're gonna have a trail that's gonna be, you know, couple 100 yards to the west of you. We want to be able to make it conducive so those folks can come off that trail and come into the city and spend their dollars and get back on the trail, right?
Does the council want to have any discussion about section 1? And I'll go back up to it again. That's the commercial. The commercial options. That sort of market to 204. If you have a preference based on the staff report, the public comments, and just what you see where you would like us to go as we go to a refined alternative based on the pros and cons.
So the biggest question I have on this is, you know, we could do either one of those. What is going to happen on the west side with the developments? What is, you know, are these people that have all those developments over there, are they waiting for us to do something like this? Because everybody's going to tear down, rebuild and make it so this is actually usable this way, because as it is right now, it's still making sense.
When you say the west side developments, the commercial.
You know,
On the west side,
on the west side of 91st. If you did this and they left that way, it makes no sense.
Agreed, and that's sort of as the council chose to invest in downtown, we are starting to see the dividends for that with some of the interest in developing it, and some of that you'll be seeing next year. So again, this becomes an implementation tool, almost acting on faith.
So you said that you talked to some of the correctors. What was the temperature?
None of the folks on the west side attended the meeting. I talked to Josh Hirschcliff directly, actually at Aquafest, and he knows LJ's. He thinks it would be great to clean up that intersection, but he said as long as it doesn't affect my business. I talked to his dads, the trade value, they thought it would be great. They questioned housing in those type of parts. So, you know, again, it gets back to more of these utilitarian questions. As you go north, talk to the owner of the gym up there, and he would be excited to have that cleaned up, and it would have little impact on his business. And then talk to the new owner, again, this comes on the north side, where all those industrial buildings are. He's excited to have that cleaned up for the frontage that he would like to have for redevelopment of those. But on that corridor, say everything above Hagen to the new car wash, didn't want to put for those businesses.
When you talked at the open house about trying to focus a little bit the improvements on the east side of the street. Could be much
Correct.
easier
Correct.
to develop too. So as far as acquiring right of way, is that kind of what you're referring to?
I know what the.
Are they gonna
property owner
reinvest?
is. They're gonna tear down and rebuild.
So having talked to Cronin, who's
Cronin is one of the major ones.
yeah, he's big one in there. He sees opportunity and he likes this idea of what we're doing. And I think if we do that, that's one less expense that he has in developing something out as well. So I think if we're able to make this street project happen through whatever funding, right? More than likely grant funding at whatever level, then that's just one less dollar he's got to put into a project. Maybe we start to pencil into it.
Okay, so if you just go by that, what this discussion has fermented. The way that I look at this is that having the on-street parking is not worth it. No matter how far we go in the future, because I don't think that they're gonna build to the sidewalk with their frontage and do it that way, because you're talking wholesale wipe out the west side of 91st and rebuild the whole thing. I don't think that's gonna happen. Market's not. So making the investment of putting on-street parking on that side of the road makes no sense. So I think going with the other option is have the bike lanes and the pedestrian walkways both protected would be the best way to go.
And that's in line, I think, with the community feedback and going back again to when we had this first discussion with council, what was important is to get the amenities in place, and the parking has always been seen as kind of an add-on. And again, if we're talking about making decisions based on budgets and impacts to private property, the first option would be the lower cost option, and it would take the least amount of right of way take. And even from option 1A, where we show the really large right of way or the landscape areas, those could be condensed too. So we could probably get this, what's presented as a 68 or 72 inch right of way. We could probably get this down comfortably to a 60, 65 foot right of way and still have a lot of these same amenities. Look at some new techniques to, even if the bike lanes are on street, we could get those protected, whether it's with the little, we'll call them the little turtles. Help me out, Kim.
RPMs or?
No, the little discs along the road.
Yeah, like the reflectorized ones or?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think those are, called those RPMs, raised pavement
Okay,
parking.
yep,
They-
so
they
we could do
be
something
solid
like
ones or
that.
reflector.
You could actually even have those in a raised grade above that, so if there's a grade of the sidewalk, so we could do different treatments to protect the bike lanes if that's a concern. But one question that was posed by the planning commission, and I didn't have this in your packet, and I heard it from other folks, is what about electric scooters? What about electric bikes? Those are a new thing we haven't had to contend with in our transportation system, and then now having a mixed use path where people could be going 25 miles an hour on an e-bike next to somebody walking with their stroller. So that's this whole new thing that, again, all these things keep evolving. And we're,
Oh, I think a sidewalk and a bike lane takes care of the scooter and the bike.
Correct.
Have a buffer in the street for both of them.
Yep.
And a buffer between the sidewalk and e-bikes, for instance, but that could be smaller buffer.
Yep.
But I think that might serve the area just as good as anything else, but we're looking at 10, 20, 30 years down the road before something kind of, do frontage improvements with their buildings up to the sidewalk type thing. I don't see it happen. I mean, I talked to Cronin, yeah, he's interested, but he's not doing any designs.
No. So can I just say, I haven't heard any different opinions yet. So is there a difference in opinion? Or would the council be okay with sort of moving forward with this option A with maybe some refinements, again, looking at how do we control the right of way and here the acquisition that keeps cost down, and then look at just creative ways to do the traffic control between pedestrians and cyclists.
So we're only talking about 91st from 204 to.
For this piece, then we're going to talk about what's north of that.
My question.
What's south of that.
I got none.
Okay. And I want to make a distinction though. You have another project south of that. That's a school project. That's already in the way. So there is another project on 91st that's not part of this. But yes.
So I guess I do have a question, and it's a little late to the game, given these drawings, but what sort of metrics do we have in terms of actual usage by bicycles, e-bikes, any of that on this road? Because I know we've got a survey, it looks like roughly 25 people said it would look better.
Yeah.
But it seems we're making a lot of accommodations designed for bikes, and I'd be curious,
Yeah, I can tell you why we're making accommodations for bike. Basically, state law says we have to accommodate multimodal travel on our bicycles, pedestrians, and vehicles. So as we look to do improvements, we have to accommodate all these modes of travel.
is that for any road improvements of this scale, or is it?
It's pretty much every road improvement we would be having complete streets, and it can be done in lots of ways, and we've done it in lots of ways, but it becomes important to do again. And this is part of our climate plan that we just did. How are we looking at different options to do things?
Okay,
And Kim or Aaron, if you want to add to that, we appreciate it. Engagement.
because I just want to make sure that, you know, if we have to build it, we have to build, but I want to make sure whatever we build will be used, that we're not sacrificing usable road space.
Yeah, and so in general, we are trying to be consistent with our engineering, design and development standards, whether that be for private development or capital projects, and that will go to our road standards for collectors and our materials that we want to, which typically does incorporate a bike lane on the street. And as we update the comp plan this next year, we want to be mindful of our desired continuous bike networks and not just do segmented little bike lanes. You know, on these segmented roads, we want to have continuous networks to encourage bicycles. And I agree with you, there's probably not a lot of bicycles that currently use that corridor, but the more that we can be mindful of the future network and having connections to generators where people live and where they want to go, and then thinking about adjacent trail networks. That'll just make it better for the community as a whole. But yeah, I do agree with the rest that we want to be mindful of non-motorized transportation. And so bikes are one of those elements, so we can either have them on street with a designated bike lane, or we can have a wider sidewalk to have more multi-use path. But then, as Russ mentioned, and just bring it up, now we have like the scooters, which are kind of a hybrid, where we don't want fast electric scooters on sidewalks, but. So it's something that we want to look into it and come up with a consistent vision as we work to update our eds to the current technology and vision and be consistent with our comp plan and our code.
And as we look at the northern segment, we're going to be presenting a different option, which is pretty popular in Seattle, really urbanized. It's called a Shero. So we'll show that even gives us the footprint more, but then you have traffic and bikes in the same space.
Okay, yeah, and I guess that's, I would just hope that the state in their infinite wisdom have projected the bike usage out somehow for a place like Lake Stephen, when they're forcing us to include all of this, because like I said, I just don't want to spend money on it won't be used. Understood, okay.
You say bikes and traffic. Usage in the bottom, you talk about the same lane.
Same lane.
So like in the area around like Green Lake, is that considered a?
Sure it comes with its own EMS costs too. So, I mean, I'm being serious though.
It's pretty well like laid out and marketed, like as a driver in that area.
Yeah,
It's different, but it's
good for what it is, but if you put cars and bikes together, you're gonna get the inevitable.
And again, I think it's going to be on this road. There's going to be heavy truck traffic. As we talk about this northern section, especially the northern section. You have lower track counts. And so maybe in some circumstances, it will make sense. But again, as we update our standards, look at data, traffic counts, we can make some of those decisions to universally. No, we just don't have kind of enough information. We can just look at what our neighbors have done across the Puget Sound. Okay, so this is the northern section. So this is really, even though it includes the section up to Vernon where the new dog bone roundabout is, it's really past that we're talking about. How do we rebuild the old sidewalks that are there and get these improvements? And again, we're talking about the same sorts of things, travel lanes, bike lanes, and in this example, you're having also on-street parking. The on-street parking would be on the west, adjacent to those Frontier Heights homeowners association neighborhood, and super tight streets in there if you haven't looked at it. And there is really, they're nothing more than alleys that go through those neighborhoods. So they have no ability to park in their neighborhoods, which always causes consternation with the neighbors as well as calls from our PD and code enforcement. But anyway, this is one of the options, and again, we're looking at on this section, can we stay within the 50-foot right of way? So both of the examples show us working within the 50-foot right of way. But when we get to the community responses, it's going to tell us something a little different than how we may want to approach this. And so this is the other option where you see, a pretty typical road standard with sidewalks, planters, and then your travel lanes. And this is the example where I share that there is the combined bike and travel lanes on this northern section, still in the same right of way. It's just treating those different segments differently in the right of way.
Michael,
Wasn't me, that's.
it doesn't like me. Sorry.
Okay, so then, again, we can look at some of the pros and cons. The pro on both of new sidewalks, along the entire corridor. On the first option, you have designated bike lanes through the corridor. And you have added street lighting. The other one, it's really all of the same things, but then you have the wider shared travel lanes like we talked about. The con on the first one, the bike lanes aren't buffered from traffic. That's the same in both. And then the bigger one is there's no buffer between sidewalks and the street. And again, as we went through the same methodology with the questionnaire, we asked the same sort of questions. What do you like? And in this case, there was a pretty clear preference for the road profile with the Sharrow and landscape buffers. And as we get through the specific written comments, a lot of them relate to the streetscape. And that's still consistent with the earlier results. What are the amenities you want to see? And back to council last year, what do you want to see? And it does get back to that, to softening the edges. Again, same questions. How safe do you think it is? Will this improve it? Yep, everything we can do will be better. And then again, going through the comments, don't expect you to go through all of those right now, but in your staff report, there's kind of a summary of which items jump to top. Kind of a mixed bag on parking here. Again, in this particular one, I think that there is a pretty well-defined need for parking because we know about how dense that neighborhood is, but it could be limited, along that one section of the Frontier Heights neighborhood that we would consider street parking. I think what's unique on this street frontage on the east side, Frontier Heights Homeowners Association owns, and I don't remember the exact dimensions, but it's 15 or 20 foot wide tract of land that's not used, and it separates the right of way from the property lines where they start. So if we wanted to do an expansion of right of way, that's where I would suggest we target, is trying to acquire that unused open space tract if we wanted to do some improvements, especially if we did want to have the parking and the landscaping. So we would need to have an acquisition on that northern section somewhere. One thing that came up at the meeting is, when do we stop these improvements? Because obviously at the 13th, it dead ends. And so after Team Fitness, does it make sense to do some of these improvements? So that could be something we can look at in the design with the parking and bike lane at a certain point. Do those just sag off into purely a sidewalk as we get to the end run of this? Other questions were posed.
Let's connect, Troy.
Okay.
Let's connect.
Other questions were posed as well. What about connecting to Frontier Heights Park? Should that be a thought process in that? Aaron has told me that is a future, it's in our 20-year plan, so
Right.
somewhere.
Can you just hold really quick? I just want to make sure we're recording. Or do you think we're still recording?
Oh, yeah, so recording, you're just missing this.
Okay, I'm sorry, go ahead, Chris.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
So anyway, there, as we look at all of these capital projects, more questions arise. Again, should we be taking this towards Frontier Heights Park? Should we look at the Vernon intersection and now make sure that there is sidewalk all the way up to SR9 where we cross the new roundabouts to get to Frontier Village? So all of these add more questions, but as we kind of work through this today, again, I just wanted to share with you the community responses we've seen. I tried to correlate those to what council had talked about several months ago. And at the end of the day, I'm hoping we can walk out with a couple of recommendations on this. And again, I'll go back up to the drawings like we did before to see if council has any stated preference. And then from this, what our contract would do is based on your feedback, the community feedback, we would get a preferred alternative. What that does, it sets the parameters for a future engineering. If council, as I heard May say, maybe this isn't the time to do this, at least we've done the groundwork until we are ready to do it. But if you are ready to do this improvement, then next year we would request design budget to design this project, start acquiring right of way as needed, and then at a later date, we would construct it. So this project in its entirety, I'm getting a little ahead now, probably will be built out in phases. And then that becomes, which phase do we do first? Do we want to focus on revitalizing that retail section for economic development? The question is posed, how are we trying to enhance our revenue streams through economic development? Well, this is an opportunity to do an economic development project like we've done downtown, where we're taking sort of a leap of faith. To the north part of that, again, there is a new developer who will be doing a master plan and redeveloping all those old industrial buildings at some point. He would love to have a beautiful frontage there, but then again, it's a matter of timing. And then if you go north of there, it becomes a matter of equity. That you have a lower income neighborhood that doesn't have the same amenities and really broken amenities up there. So lots of complexities to this project, some of it is economic development, some of the equity, some of it's just building a good transportation system. But back to my initial question is, are there sort of preferences on this northern section, the road profile based on the community input and your own thoughts from previous discussions? The north side.
I concur with the community's feedback around option 2B. Especially given that, like you said, there aren't a lot of heavy trucks and a ton of traffic on that northern end. I think the sharing of the bike lanes or the sharing of the lanes with the bikes is less of an issue. I really like the barrier between traffic and pedestrian areas. I think that really encourages more. I think about the South Lake Stevens Road and just, you know, that what that barrier affords in terms of feeling of safety and I think the aesthetic is preferable too. So my 2 cents.
What about the hybrid option that also came up in the written comments about the parking lot there? Because that would impact right of way width. They would take it from this existing 50-foot right of way to a need of probably something like a 58 or a 60-foot right of way.
In asking about adding the parking
Correct.
and
It's one of the street.
having the divided.
You're talking about on the east side.
I would suggest that we add the road would probably shift. We would get acquisition on the east, but add parking on the west.
Closer to that parking on the west, right?
It's, there is, but there's also not full sidewalks or any, so it would be a complete rebuild of that section because the sidewalk's pretty broken and don't have the matching on the other side. So it would be a reconstruction. us.
I think hybrid would be fine. Like the shuttle. that area is different. And what the community said they wanted. One of the things that I want to have understood as we go forward with this is that when we do our cost estimating of this, we look at what the cost estimate for all this, all the maintenance of the trees and vegetation and everything is. And who's doing that, Public Works is probably gonna have a big part of that, or we're gonna contract it out, whichever. But we're gonna need to be mindful of that, because we're talking about a lot of vegetation, and we've had issues with vegetation in some of our areas before, like, Lundy Parkway. And even South Lake Stevens Road. So maintaining that stuff to be pristine as we put it in is kind of high.
And I would say on this northern end, we can be very thoughtful and we could leave it at just street trees. If we're looking at the section between Market and 204, that would have more intensive landscaping and vegetation. So really that corridor that covers the big factor.
But this is the section of road where parking will take.
Correct.
So we would, that's something more like what's on the right, we would eliminate the existing street park.
Correct. If we stayed within the same footprint right away.
Where's the street right now in North End? Yeah.
It's, so, you know where Team Fitness is. So across the street there,
Yeah.
there is an older kind of broken up sidewalk and there is probably some nondescript
Huh.
parking. I can't even tell you.
It's
if
like,
there-
it's like a shoulder.
Yeah. I
That's
can't
sort
even
of
tell
like
you
a
if it's
kind of-
striped or not.
Got it. Okay, I know what you're talking about. Thanks.
But it's used for that.
That makes sense.
That purpose, as well as on the other side, where I'm talking about this little landscape strip that's owned by the HOA. That's where you'll see trucks and larger vehicles parking. It's sort of the gravel area. That's kind of that area, but it's not necessarily a public space too.
Got it.
I guess my personal preference would be something that maintains parking, if that's an area that we're talking about where and parking's at a premium and. You know, there are certain amenities lacking up there. I can't imagine a bigger slap in the face to come to and say you can't park here anymore because we want to make it look nice.
Are there any other thoughts on this project? If not, can bring this information back to our consultant to work on it. Preferred alternative.
Just on this, the southern portion of it, I think at the open house, you talked about wanting to preserve the trees on the east side. And potentially there was I think a small thought process of maybe putting sidewalk on the east area of those trees.
Yes.
Is that still?
Yeah, that's really reflected in the way the drawing.
So there's a situation where we're gonna be eliminating parking stalls.
Correct.
In the parking lot.
In the parking.
Parking lots, which as Ace Hardware, indicated, their parking lot is utilized. On that north section of the parking lot, on the south section of the parking lot, I would agree it's not utilized as much, but I think. You don't want to eliminate parking stalls when you got them in this environment, especially in a commercial environment, because. To get them back, you're probably not gonna get them. Yeah. So I would discourage putting a new sidewalk. And on the east side of those trees. Because it would eliminate parking, so.
So what Gary's talking about is at the open house and in the design option. The consultants and others have said, yeah, we should really try to keep those mature trees. And I had done an informal survey, I mean, very informal. I looked at Google Earth images for the last decade and looked at that parking lot. And in all of those images, that parking lot was probably 50% utilized in any of those pictures, which led me to say, well, yeah, maybe we should focus our sidewalk on this side and do our work on this side, because there's less impact to the whole if they're not using it. And we did it the right way, it made sense, but we also did hear from Eagle Stats that with their particular business, their parking lot in different hours does get some heavier utilization. So I would say both of those at this point are conjecture. I've already told you my methodology, which was very base. And theirs was anecdotal, so I think that to make the decision on where we take that, we would need to probably do a parking study and actually get somebody out there, do some counters and do that for a while and really get some good information on the utilization of that parking.
I mean, the north side of that shopping center is much busier than the south side, in addition to the parking. Total number of parking stalls, just looking at our aerial map here, it's, you know, the buildings are closer to the roads where parking is less, so I would need to, I guess it's in essence penalize them, sure, taking away parking.
This, you know, this, as I started out, I was saying we want to have a system right away, but it doesn't mean that we can't have some differences in the way it looks, as long as the overall function is important and we're maintaining or hitting all of these program goals. So I think that's a piece that we can refine. Because that's sort of what would come back with. They would show us, like you saw the existing conditions, they would come back and show us, well, here's a streetscape from south to north. And then here's the standard kind of profile. So I think there's nuanced things that we can look at.
At what point did we start working against ourselves? The point of all this is to drive traffic to the area. You know, how much parking would we sacrifice to make that happen before we wish we had more parking? People were driving to the area.
Any more thoughts on this? And again, I apologize that there was a glitch in getting the staff report, because the staff report in particular, there's a lot of thought that went into it that looked at what council had to say several months ago, comparing it to what the public had to say. So take a look at that, really good summary. And if we need to have additional workshop on this before, if you feel like we need more discussion, just let me know and we can do that. Otherwise, I think I've got, we need some feedback today to look at a couple of hybrid type options for both north and south that we can bring back to you at a future meeting.
All right, great. Good stuff, Russ.
Thank you.
All right, so we are scheduled to be out here at 4. So we have 17 minutes to discuss fireworks.
Let's go.
Let's do it.
Let's do it.
Can't waste your time there.
All right. I know this was wanted to be brought on by council members, so I'll let you guys do the discussion.
Well, I mean, I'll speak first. I mean, we've had 4th of July comes and goes, and July 5th we'll get emails and people calling saying, when are you guys gonna have the kahunas to do what you need to do? Because this is driving us crazy. And so I think we're probably at, personally, I think we're at that point. I know there was a public vote a year and a half ago. A lot of people voted. I, as a kid, blew off fireworks. I'm guilty, but I didn't blow off what's going on today. And quite frankly, when you see people blowing off fireworks 100 feet away from gas pumps that could blow up a house and doing all sorts of other crazy things, what really bothers me is the confrontations that take place between the neighbors. When you have somebody that's really opposed to fireworks and is affected by them, and the person that loves fireworks and says to hell with you. That confrontation is played out multiple times in our community, and I think it's really sad. It's going to lead to something bad at some point in time. And I think we need to step up, and it's not going to stop overnight, but I think we need to make a move that have a public hearing, bring the folks out and listen to their concerns. But I think it's time that we take a stand and start to put in place some sort of ban. Because these fireworks are not what they were 10, 15 years ago. These things can blow up cars, they can blow up houses, they can kill people. And you got the knuckleheads with the beer can in one hand, light things off in the other. And it's just, something's gonna happen. And it's gonna be bad. My thoughts.
My thoughts are, we have so many vets in Lake Stevens. When I doorbell for my campaign, I talked to so many vets who said PTSD is a real thing. And when this happened for the 4th of July, I go crazy. And of course, people that have pets, they go crazy, and babies and grandmas like me. I mean, it's just really, really hard. There's not hardly a generation or a population that isn't impacted by this. And I really am with Mr. Peters Hagen over there 100%. And I'm from a house, a town in Pennsylvania that had fireworks in the 1700s, okay? That was my home.
That was called Bunker Hill.
It was called Bunker Hill, right? It was just west of Philadelphia. And we loved our fireworks, but it was safe because we were in a big field and we weren't, near houses. And it was, everybody was together, it was all put together. So, and they still do it, it's wonderful, but
So
not safe here.
I'll play devil's advocate a little bit, not much, because I agree with getting rid of fireworks. However, would that be the caveat that the city puts on a 4th of July? 4th of July fireworks display on the lake?
I would say we would have to do that.
What is, can I just ask, like, what is that, what's the cost of something like?
I can tell you exactly what it costs for Aquafest
Yeah.
to do their like 9 minutes worth of the thing with, I think it was 33 shells, and it was $19,000.
Okay, that's helpful.
Usually what the cities are spending for a 4th of July fireworks extravaganza is right around 100,000.
So I'm with you on that, but I have concern because public access to viewing the lake is not as great as you think it is.
No, I don't think it's great at all.
No, right. So it would benefit the lake, those around the lake, but like where I live, I wouldn't. Those folks, 60% of the people of our city west of 9 would not be able to see it. So then where do they go to go see it? And can we
send them to Lake Washington?
I mean,
You might have designated parking and shuttles to create events
I
within parks.
get that. Like, we could
Well,
build
even
parks.
then, you don't have very much
Even
green
then.
space to put them. Even if you're shuttling them in, there's not that much.
I agree with you. If there's gonna be a fireworks ban, I would like to see some sort of. I don't know if the city is the right entity to do it, or if it's one of our civic organizations is the right organization to do it.
Or maybe a shared.
Maybe a shared plan, but I would also like to see it incorporate not just the lake. And
So
how do we do that? I don't know.
How do you, that's no different than any other community though, Brett. I mean, Seattle does their stuff over Lake Union. You can't see it from South Seattle or the west side of Queen Anne. Or, Madison Park area, or even the east side of the UW area. So
Well,
what do you,
Yeah.
how do you satisfy everybody?
So-
Not going to.
So maybe here's a thought, because I think initially when we think that, we think, oh, let's go down to North Cove and shoot them off North Cove. Maybe shoot them off the Safeway parking lot, and at that point, everyone gets to see it. It's the high point of the city, and the west side can see it, and the lake folks can see it. And so maybe we just gotta rethink of where we shoot those off.
I mean, I guess my issue with this is more of a democratic one. I wasn't here for it, but it's my understanding there was a vote. And I know I've heard several comments, even in the few months I've been here, about how little that vote should mean, but at the end of the day, there was a vote. And to now come back, a year and a half later and say, well, we're just gonna change our minds.
But the problem with that vote is that it was so little that it was really scientifically, it didn't mean it.
What was, cause I don't know, what was it?
52-48. If you put that vote 2 weeks after 4th of July, it'd be probably 70-30. It took place, I mean, seriously,
Well, and fewer than 10,000
Yeah,
people voted, I think,
it
if
was.
I remember correctly.
and it's,
Yeah.
so the shock value wears off over time. And we have this vote in November and half the people are forgotten about it, and then we get 4th of July again. And then it's the hot button issue.
Well, and I guess that's part of my point is, right after it happens, people care, but then if they don't care enough to show up and vote. I just want to make sure that, there's not a knee-jerk reaction. Because we were hearing about it in the moment, but I guess to me it seems. My preference would be to set a date out and maybe have another vote. And if people turn out in force and it's overwhelming, that they want them gone. I'm fine with that, but to have had a vote so, recently, and then to say, here are all the reasons why it doesn't matter. I don't know, I guess that just, that is a
Here's-
hang up for me.
Here's another perspective on voting or not voting. And I was in favor of an advisory vote. I think at that point, I didn't have a good sense of, where. I think I don't think it's right to allow people to vote on something that is damaging to people, damaging to our city. I guess I don't care if, 50% or 60% or 80% of people feel like fireworks are great. It's causing harm. And I don't think that people should get to say, just because most of us agree that it's okay to cause harm, that we should keep causing harm. So I struggle a little bit with it. I mean, I like democracy a lot, but I also don't, I think we have a responsibility to reduce harm in our city. And I also feel like, given that our chief of police and our fire chief are both highly in favor, and my assumption, they're not here to speak for themselves.
I heard,
Yeah.
he is in favor, yeah.
Given that they're overseeing the safety of our city and that's their stance, I feel sort of trustworthy.
So the other thing, the other nugget of data that needs to be put in the calculus is we've now become a magnet for out of city. Folks, if you go to a party, 4th of July party, not totally fun. But if you go to a 4th of July party, yeah, it'll be our residents who are hosting the party, but there will be 10 to 15 people from everywhere. And they don't give a rip about the casinos other than shooting. And I'm Brian, I'm agnostic on this, right?
No, it's
Like,
I appreciate
Like
your point.
I respect the vote. I also was holding together a kid's face this year and got him over, right?
Right.
In the intersection just down below my house. So I get both sides of this, but there's a side of me that highly agrees with Gary, like. One day it's not gonna be fireworks going off, it's gonna be some dude coming out with a gun because he's pissed. At the chaos that we look at on the 4th of July.
So here's something, a little bit of history, because I think I'm the only one in the room that was here for the first time that we ever even discussed doing away with fireworks out in 2010. It was probably 50-50 of people that were there at the talk were against fireworks or for it. And, you could do the demographics of who it was that was saying on each of them. And we had the one lady that came, well, my son blew his thumb off, and she was all crying and everything. And the next guy stood there and said, well, I got a question for you. Where were you? That was the kind of thing. It was standing room only in the thing, in the room. I couldn't believe how many people were there for that. We've never had that for any other thing. Standing room only. It was just that. That's right. Costco last year, but
Living on an island.
but I'll tell you that the fireworks was the same way. Now we did it again, and I think you were on the council at that point. Did we just do it again 6 years ago? And it wasn't quite as bad, but it was still positive, negative, don't touch my fireworks or get rid of fireworks. It's just 50-50. We're still gonna have to do that again.
But the other part of that equation, though, is you got the argument from the nonprofits that said, just like the lady said this morning, our church benefits from this, so I can't see it. That issue is non-existent anymore.
These aren't church parking lot fireworks.
Exactly.
They've been saying-
That stuff
saying
used to
fireworks.
happen.
Yeah.
But now everything's bought at the reservation. It's a total different game. And if your church is making $1,000 off that, I'll write the check. It's crazy,
So that is the other perspective of it. In order to do a truly effective fireworks ban, you have to ban all fireworks. can't say you can have these little poppers or you can have these little things.
No, because that's true, because the ordinance we have requires it to be safe and sane. The ones from Marysville or from the, they're not legal, even in our city.
But Brett's saying that all would have to be banned,
No,
even the
true.
state, yeah.
Because we did it, the ordinance we have now already did that, where
Yeah.
we could have safe and sane.
Yeah.
Nobody's using safe and sane.
Yeah.
And the sign, the sign over there on the reservation said you can only fire these off on a reservation, it does no good.
So, can somebody, I think I know, but I just want to hear, like, what would be, let's say we decide, let's move forward with looking at a fireworks ban, what would the process look like? And the timing, and, because I know that couldn't go into an effect, if it passed tomorrow, it wouldn't go into effect until after the next 4th of July, is that?
I think
that it's a full year until.
Okay, but what is the process up until?
So I think at this point, it would be if the council wanted to go forward with this, it'd be creating an ordinance. Having a public hearing on it, voting yes or no.
Public hearing, I like that very much. It's gonna burn your thermal suit down, because.
I just want to make sure you're in town
Well,
for when that public hearing happens.
oh, cause you don't.
Or that it's after the first of the year.
Oh, okay, all right, yeah.
How-
Just joking, I'm not scared, it's fine.
How hard would it be to have a second advisory vote? I know I'm in.
It's
Yeah,
expensive.
It costs money.
Well,
It's not worth it.
And the other thing you're saying, Ryan, is we didn't like the first answer,
Exactly.
right? So let's see if we can get a second answer.
That we
And-
like better.
Well, I want to see if it's the same answer. I guess if it's such a hot button issue, I would expect now people to show up and vote the other way. If they
Except-
don't,
Yeah, now we couldn't get a vote on it until February, right?
So right now you could be looking at a special vote, which would probably be February, which I think there's gonna be a vote already. I think that.
So we wouldn't have to pay the extra
Is the
40.
fire district doing their,
No, they're doing theirs in November.
oh, that November? Okay. So then you'd have a $70,000 bill to be able to do that. On an off-cycle vote, so.
It'd be cheaper to wait until next November. Or August, I
To
guess.
vote.
Yeah.
To have a vote, yeah.
I mean, it would-
Two more.
I understand it would be work. I get, like I said, it doesn't sit well with me that, 18 months ago, we asked the public, how do you feel about this?
I think we would need, in the public hearing, I think we would
Mhm.
need to say. I think we need to acknowledge just that. Yes, we asked you to vote, and yes, you voted to keep them, and here is why, despite that,
And we also need the data that we've had in the last couple of years of what's going on.
but I think, I don't disagree, doesn't sit well with me.
Yeah, and I mean, to the point of, it's only a matter of time before something bad happens. I'm the last person who wants that, but I feel like, all it takes is one person to make a threat on any issue. What are we gonna do? So we don't want. I mean,
I don't think this is just one person.
well, I mean, I get how many people would it be that, how many people are we concerned are gonna go out and do something about this versus, some other issue they don't like, right? I guess I don't like making a decision under a hypothetical doom and gloom scenario like that, if there's actionable intelligence that our police officers are worried about, I would pay attention to that, but if it's just.
I think we have data, not about what you're describing, but in
Okay,
terms of the damage and the.
I think you can talk to Chief Bezos personally to see what confrontation took place in his own neighborhood. He'll show you a video that's crazy.
Yeah,
Well,
And
How is everyone seeing that
Yeah,
video?
let
I
me
haven't.
know. so,
well, and Gary, you bring up another point on this is. In the month leading up to 4th of July. How many homes have? A stockpile in their garages. That if the wrong thing happened, you would literally see a house and the 3 and 4 next to them go up. And we're okay with that right now.
And I mean, if there's data saying that that's increased significantly, then I'm open to that too. Ever since I was little, Bloom City has been a thing. I know people have gone there and gotten. It's military grade fireworks, and so if there's some.
they blow them off next to your house.
I mean,
They're okay with that.
I don't. I mean, I make do, you know, I tell myself it's one night, I prepare my family, and my
It's
pet.
not one night.
I get, maybe I'm lucky, and it kind of, it's maybe a rolling 48 hours, but
We had fireworks at, just across the way from me last night.
That's,
Yeah.
that's fireworks.
It's like, are you kidding me?
There was no football game.
but those,
No football game.
but those are
Thursday
banned,
night
right?
football.
They should be wholesale legal that day, and they still happen, so that's an enforcement issue.
Well, it's illegal for Boone City once anyway.
Right, yeah,
So, you know, we're still talking that if they were doing safe and sane, that on Fourth of July only, everything would be fine.
yeah,
We wouldn't have this issue in the first place, but they're not.
and I guess,
It's really hard for us to enforce it.
yeah, and I guess what comes out of it is not about what I want, it's the data point I have is there was a public vote, it went a certain way, and I feel like we should do more to validate or disregard that than just saying, you know, yeah, we decided that doesn't matter because X, Y, and Z. That's the part I really have an issue with,
So-
not about what I.
But I don't think that that's what it really is. I think what it is that we had the vote, and then over the last 2 years, it's gotten worse.
Okay, yeah, like I said,
I mean, it's been a heck of a lot worse since we had that vote.
if, yeah, I mean, and if there's data to that effect that I just haven't seen it, I'm totally open to that, I just want to see something more
So,
concrete.
so now I would suggest, without, you know, doing any kind of major research on it. Like, about the same time we did that, vote, county voted theirs down completely, right? So we're like one of the last bastion of freedom,
That's the issue.
Yeah.
4th of July freedom,
It's that
right?
magnet, it's the
Yeah.
magnet issue.
And,
Yeah.
and so it goes back to that, my other thought that we have so many people who come into our city. Because it's legal.
It's fireworks tourism.
So, just so we can,
Money off of it.
you know what, that's great, right?
There you go.
Along
with the big Firework.
You're gonna blow it out
Let's-
this place,
Let's
right?
risk our children for this.
Sure,
Um,
doing it.
Okay, so, what I'm hearing then is, the council would like to see, an ordinance written up. And that discussion started.
And some data around,
Okay.
you know, what.
Do you want data in a workshop first or data in in a ordinance?
I'm fine with it being in the ordinance, I just wanna see some. Quantify it.
Work session.
Sure.
Yeah, workshop data, let's have a great spin up, what an ordinance looks like.
And maybe I can, since I'm the fire's house, North County Fire Liaison, blah, 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 I'll reach out to Chief O'Brien and see if he can either come and speak or provide some information about the impact on.
Yeah.
That was great. Yep.
Okay, that's the end of our agenda, but I do want to open the floor to two things. One, anything else out there we need to talk about? Anything? Okay, good. And then, Jean, if you would run down your list of what I heard.
Above it, and I'm actually gonna email this to everybody.
Okay.
I've got them on my list there.
Yeah.
So the strategic staffing plan for the police, keep a placeholder for 2 additional officers. Should we fill vacant positions if we have applications? That one, that was talked about.
We
So
took
we got rid of it.
the two.
Yeah, I thought we
off.
would do those.
So that didn't change, but that was early on before we changed it. Proposed works, bring back an estimate on cost to maintain signals once we hit 50,000 population. Community development, there was no items in the staff plan. Parks and Rec, bring back the comparison between cost of vandalism versus FTE cost for a park ranger. Show hours spent for the repairs, employee costs. Material costs. Finance, there was no follow-up items, IT, there was no follow-up items, HR, there was no follow-up items, and executive, there's no follow-up items. We've done the city hall space, facilities, capacity. Have we missed out on bringing capability at the mill due to the space being used as city purpose? For council meetings and boards and commissions. Bring back how other cities pay for their city halls. Have a conversation with property owners that related to the Everett Clinic and the South Lake Stevens site. Even though we kind of ruled out Everett Clinic, we will make a call. Keep the old library building in mind for future community space. Bring back the museum discussion, see what makes sense, have 2 or 3 stories. Keep in mind bonding for sidewalks, TD project. Is there other monies, or is there other projects that could be completed with the same monies set aside for the city campus? And there appears to be consensus that the number 2 option was the best fit for the future campus. That was South Lake Student Center. Move into the 2024 budget, give additional consideration to filling a park ranger position versus 1 additional park worker. Look at records management specialist full-time. Look at funding options for the safety and training coordinator position. Hold the PAM position, the budget, the police officers. What we're kind of talking about there. Bring back block safety system for discussion. Back update for ILA for the water line. Bring back revenue sources, all other revenue sources of council discussion like utility taxes. 91st seems to have consensus to move forward on option A for the south side with some tweaks. Where did the improvements stop on the north end? Any option choice, the surveys best fit the north side. Maintain trees on the east side, train existing parking spots if possible. Maybe a parking study in that area. Fireworks, if they're banned, look at options for a community fireworks show. Look at locations where the whole community can see it. Bring back the process for the ban fireworks, the work session. Bring back data for calls related to fireworks the past several years. We have the department and fire department provided that, so bring that back. And the last one is to bring back the ordinance to ban it.
Missing anything, elaborate on anything? All right, great. Hey, I just want to thank staff, a lot of great work put in. I thought all the visuals were wonderful, and hopefully the council was given good information to make decisions on. And I want to thank the council members who showed up for your input and for being engaged. It just makes the process easier, especially when we're talking about the budget, to be able to workshop this stuff and get through it. So with that, let's go forth and do good things.